would you do us the honors of
Yes. Okay.
opening up a prayer?
Absolutely. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful day, and we ask in the name and under the precious blood of Yahshua HaMashiach that every word that's spoken today is only for your glory, and that your kingdom is the absolute focus of this mission. So, Holy Spirit, we ask you to dwell within us, and I'd like to say this special prayer to the Holy Spirit. Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of thy faithful, and kindle in us the fire of thy love. Send forth thy Spirit, and they shall be created, and thou shalt renew the face of the earth. O God, who taught the hearts of the faithful by the light of the Holy Spirit, grant by the gift of this same Spirit we may be ever truly wise and always rejoice in his consolation through the same Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Amen.
Hi.
Hello. It's good to see you.
We're supposed to clap.
Oh, of course we have to clap.
How are you?
I am blessed beyond measure.
Right? The fact that this came about in the way that it came about. I mean, I've known you, Nectaria, for almost close to 15 years now.
Cut it out.
Yeah.
It's been
And then
that
we met and we were kind of in the same circles, and then you did whatever, we'll get into what happened with you, and I went the other direction, but we kind of knew people through other people, and then God, the universe, source, whatever you want to call it, brought us back together, and now we're sitting here.
And it's all miraculous.
So it's all miraculous. I was thinking of praying about it on the way, flying here and driving here, and it's just like, this is cool. So I had notes. I didn't have an agenda. I had notes, and I said, I don't know, I just didn't feel right to, do an outline or a program or something. So I just want to, your story is fascinating, astonishing even. So I'd like to probably start with that.
Okay.
I think that's something that's, obviously everyone's story is unique, but your story in particular, and how, you had this plan, and then things happened, and you had to make changes to those plans, and then how that led you into the material that we can get into later. But yeah, tell me about your childhood.
Absolutely. Well, in the beginning, we all have our own journeys as far as when we're born into this world. We think and we see the world the way it was presented to us. Now, obviously, as a little child, we're not with judgment. We don't have judgments when we're that little.
Not born with it, yeah.
And that's obviously because there's developmental aspects that's happening. But as time moves on, there's a truth that's within each one of us that starts to emerge, and it starts to characterize who we are. There's certain things like that marks us. And so...
Where do you think that truth comes from?
I think it's universal, and I think it's something that God puts in the heart, that Most High puts in our hearts. So, I mean, how would it make sense? I was brought up not in a specific, religion per se, but we did have some Protestant sentiments. We were brought up with some of that.
You were in Boston-ish area?
In the Worcester area. Worcester.
Worcester.
Worcester,
yes.
And so basically, I was in a pursuit to find God. And
totally on your own?
It was prompted out of necessity.
What was that necessity?
The necessity was something comical.
Yeah.
A punishment was coming my way. And my mother said, "You better get in your room and pray." And I'm like, you know what? All right, I'm going to go in my room and I'm going to pray. But I went in my room and I'm like, you know what? What if I pray to Buddha and Allah gets upset?
Had you had any interaction, like family-wise, directed from your parents or whatever? Like this, did you go to church every week, or was
Not
it just,
at all?
just
it was
God is up there in the sky and you should talk to him because you're going to get in trouble?
Well, at this point, I've seen our family engage in religion like once or twice a year, maybe for Christmas, maybe for Easter.
Yeah, I was going to say
right?
the Christmas and Easter,
so
religious.
It really didn't make a lot of sense. It was more like
a to-do,
one of
box.
those things that would happen.
Gotcha.
You're invited to do it. So when my mother prompted me to go in the room and pray, I'm like, okay, Now, it was kind of strange because it's not like she always said that to me, but it was just on the fly, one of those situations, which was good because it caused me to ask questions. And
How old were you?
I was around 9 years old,
Okay.
to the best of my recollection. So we would receive a lot of books. My mother loved yard sailing, and so the Masonic home used to provide books from, people who were deceased and say, hey, to my mother, go ahead, sell some of these, or people would just give gifts or books or whatever, and we would have these little yard sales. And I came across a couple of the books. One of them was a Marino Missal, which I thought was a Bible. And the other one was about...
What is that for people that don't know?
Oh, good question. Yes, thank you. Help me out here to help others. So the Marino Missal has the prayers on one side of the book in English and the other in Latin.
Wow.
And I thought it was just the Bible because I wasn't too familiar with the Bible, right?
Wow.
And I was reading other books like on Buddhism or Taoism and I was just fascinated with everything. I didn't have, like we said, we didn't grow up with any judgments as children. So I'm reading this and I'm like, this Bible is really cool. I've got to figure this out. I love the Latin. I love the English. I love all that. So I started to memorize the prayers. Now, of course. In Latin.
Yeah.
Now, with an eclectic mix, of course, of Metallica. I would come home and listen to my Metallica, do my push-ups, my sit-ups, all of those things to prepare and train in the martial arts, which I was heavily involved in as a youngster. And I just found this attraction. And in the Gloria, the glory to God in the highest prayer was absolutely beautiful. So I was attracted to this. Now, of course, I'm jumping around a little bit in the story in terms of chronology. But when my mother said, get in there and get in that room and pray, I was like, wait a minute. I've seen books come for our yard sales to Buddha. I've seen books come in about other religions. And of course, being in school with a bunch of others, I was, connected to a bunch of other people with different thoughts or beliefs.
Of course.
So I'm like, okay, well, if I pray to Buddha, maybe Allah will get upset. If Allah gets upset, if I pray to Jesus, I don't know who's who.
So you're literally 9 years old having this logical
Yes.
thought process of who am I praying to, and I don't want to piss somebody off. Wow.
I'm like, okay.
At 9 years old, okay.
I threw it up in the air. I'm like, I don't
Everybody
know.
listen.
I don't know. I said, I don't know who to pray to, and I'm not going to start causing a controversy up there. So I'm not doing this. So I just went back and listened to Metallica. And I said, someday, I said, Lord, whoever you are, please reveal yourself to me, because I really want to know who to pray to. Who is the creator of the universe?
Yeah.
Well, God answers prayer. So this is what's beautiful. This I didn't know the meaning of this until later because I wasn't studied. I didn't study the Bible. And I had this dream of...
How old are you?
Probably around 9 years old. It was rather quick. My answer to my prayer came quickly. And so I'm in this dream, whatever it is, and I'm in this underground dungeon. And I'm like, what's this? And I see a man chained to the floor. And I walk over to him, and somehow I knew, I'm like, wait a minute, tomorrow you're going to be crucified. We got to get you out of here. And he had a serene smile on his face, and I went over, and I went to touch his leg as he's laying down, and he was wearing all white garments, and he was luminous, like he was illuminating light, And I'm like, as soon as I touched his leg, I knew in seconds, just automatically, I'm like, this is God. My prayer was answered. I know who God is now. And years later, why the weeping is because his body, the church, I've had a burden in my heart about the church.
Church being
Meaning,
the physical body of him on earth.
Later, all right, so let's stick to the story and then we'll get to that because it's very moving to me. But when I touched his leg, I said, whoever you are, I want to marry you. You're the man. You're the one I want. And I didn't understand that. I'm 9 years old. That makes no logical sense. I wasn't a Roman Catholic. But then here's the comical part. Years later in high school, I'm watching a movie came out, Whoopi Goldberg. What is it? The Sister Act?
Sister Act, yeah.
I'm watching that. I'm like, wait a minute. They're dressed in wedding garbs, but they're marrying Jesus. I'm like, that's what I have to be because of what I saw when I was 9 years old.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, so how does this work? I'm not a Roman Catholic or a Catholic. I didn't know about Romanism or any of that. So I'm like, okay, so how is this supposed to work out? So I'm like, okay, so I need to start looking into this. And of course, the book, the Marino Missal, the book that's Latin and English on one side, I'm still over there. And I'm keeping it in the back of my mind, like this is the Bible I've always wanted. And then all the pieces start to fall together. I was invited to a funeral in high school. And one of my friend's brothers passed away. And I was invited, and I've never been to a funeral before, and I've never been to a Roman Catholic church before.
Wow. So your first exposure to the Roman Catholic Church was a funeral?
Yes.
Wow.
And I was very nervous because I didn't want to offend anybody. So I'm walking in the building, and I had a boyfriend at the time. Mm-hmm. Now, the boyfriend and I agreed. I said, when I'm done with high school, I'm going to go become a nun, but this is going to be utilitarian, this relationship. We're not going to really be courting in a romantic way, but I will help you learn English, which he studied and learned English. He was Spanish. Okay. And you will help me by just being my boyfriend. So it was a courtship, but not involving that, other kind of love. It was more platonic.
Okay, gotcha.
So
let's help each other.
Yes.
We respect each other. We're not
companions.
In love. Right, yeah.
And and he agreed, but the problem is he fell in love with me, at the end of...
Nectaria.
It's like that's not part of the agreement. So
your first exposure to the Roman Catholic Church, you're in high school. You have this platonic relationship, and tell me what happened at that funeral, I guess, because that jump to what happens next is. So what happened at that funeral?
Okay, so number one, I'm highly nervous, and when I get nervous, I laugh. Like sometimes I could laugh hysterically. So I'm walking in, and I said to Eddie, the guy, the boyfriend, and I said, listen, if I'm doing something wrong, just tell me. I don't want to offend anybody. I've never been in a Catholic church, so I don't really understand how this is supposed to work. And so...
He probably grew up Roman Catholic.
He grew up Roman Catholic, and I was so happy because I was like, I'm on the in crowd because I'm going to know when to stand, when to kneel, what to do, and I'll be able to follow what he's doing.
Yep.
So we get in, and he dunks his fingers in, and he makes the sign of the cross, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. I can imitate that. And we get in the pews, and then all of a sudden, now we're in a line, and we've got a bunch of Spanish people in the line, okay? So I'm here, and Eddie said, anytime you get nervous, just squeeze my hand. So I got my hand, and anytime I got nervous, I would just squeeze his hand, and then the laughter started. Okay, so... I got nervous at a funeral, and I squeezed his hand. He said, "That hurts. Stop." And I was like, "Okay, this isn't good." Now I started to laugh, and the tears are coming down, and I'm like, I have to pretend I'm crying. So I get down on the kneeler and started to pretend I'm crying, and the laughter started down the row with all these other Spanish people because they saw what I was going through.
Oh my gosh.
They knew me.
Oh man.
So I was like, okay, I've got to behave. But this was the first time I heard Gregorian chant. Okay, so in the service,
we could probably do a podcast just on Gregorian chants. It's pretty fascinating stuff, but we won't go there. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
We'll have many of these, I think. So, God willing. So I fell in love as soon as I heard this chant, and it was in Latin. Mm-hmm. I'm like, whatever this is, I have to know what this is. And then...
Did you understand any of it from the learning the Latin prayers? You recognize it as Latin,
I recognized it, and I knew it was something like Gregorian, but I didn't know it was Gregorian chant. Okay. And the other part of it was my cousin was yelled at, and he was like, "You go clean your room." My uncle said, "Go clean your room." So he's going in there, and he's cleaning his room, and he opens his sock drawer, and he's looking in the sock drawer, and I'm like, "Ooh, what is that?" It looks like a little treasure. And it was a tape cassette recording of chants from Jerusalem or Urbs Jerusalem Beata, okay, which is about the new and eternal Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, and that's quoting Revelations, right?
Yeah.
When my cousin put that in, I said, put it in the tape cassette. He starts playing it. He was making fun of it. I said, no. I heard this music before. I heard it at a funeral. This is beautiful. I've always wanted to figure this out. So I was studying and learning and figured it out, where this chant came from. And that's when I fell in love head over heels with this ancientness of the Roman Catholic Church. And so that was with Sister Act, the movie, with Eddie, my Spanish friends, the influence. That's when I said I have to become a Roman Catholic or a Catholic. So it just so happens serendipity happens where...
Let me pause you there for a second. So I'm still trying to understand the dream was obviously hugely impactful. And you said that was God showing you this is the connection. This is what you're supposed to chase and become and investigate and all those things. And then in your young mind, the Roman Catholic ancient ways and things that they did and the systems they had in place, that made sense to you as, okay, this is the path that I need to go to get to where I think I need to be.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It was just something, it felt like
right.
In the hand in glove.
This is where I'm supposed to be.
This is home to me. So, and excellent. Yeah, good for you for tying those dots together. So I'm like, okay, so my bus stop was at a church, St. Joe's Church in Charlton.
You're still in high school, right?
High school.
Okay.
And a friend of mine ended up kicking his hacky sack in one of the vents. So after school, he's like, okay, well, I'll go ahead, retrieve it. And he had to go through the building. And I was like, wait a minute, the church was open this whole time? He's like, well, yeah, my friend John Cox. And he's opening the church the door, and I'm like, can I go in there with you? And he's like, yeah, come on with me. And he's at home, he's relaxed. And I was like, this is beautiful. I saw the stained glass. The church has been moved since. It's been razed to the ground. But I just knew I felt home again in my spirit. So every point as time is moving on in the timeline, I could feel more and more this sense of home. Mm-hmm. And this was another... longing, an instance of that. Mm-hmm. So that's when I says, okay, so when are church services? I want to go. I want to, participate in this. And so I was able to get permission from my mom. But how that all happened was on my way, because, again, the church was our bus stop. When I was coming in the morning, I would come in a little bit early at the bus stop, and I'm running out the door because I could hear the bus outside, and I'm running, and I bumped into this priest, and I was like, he's like, well, who are you? Because I'm this young...
You literally bumped into him.
Well, not physically, but definitely, entered in his path. And he's like, I haven't seen you here before. And I says, well, my mom takes me to the Grange Hall once a year or something. And he's smiling, and I says, well, listen, I want to become a nun, I said. And he's looking at me. He's like, well, you're not Catholic, are you? And I said, no. I said, but I after school, I'll have like 15 minutes. Let's get it done. And he just laughed at me. And
that's so your personality, too. This is what I want to do. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's get it done. I didn't know that there was a process to this. So he was saying, okay, well, no, it's like a courtship. It's going to take time, this thing.
In the moment, or you came back later and he ran you through everything?
He told me in the moment. He says, listen, I said, well, I got to go. The bus, is coming. But he says, it's going to take time. You have to join the rite of Christian initiation for adults. And then I continued to have meetings with this priest, and he explained it to me. Well, this is how the process works. But he was utterly delighted, to help.
Yeah.
And so that's when I asked permission, and my mother said, sure, no problem. You can, go to the meetings. And so I went to the meetings for a year and a half.
What do these meetings consist of?
Well,
is it like school?
Funny, it's like a CCD thing, but it's
CCD?
All right, so it's like a Sunday school.
Okay.
Okay, but it's Sunday school for converts, people who are converting to the Roman Catholic Church. So I go in there for the first meeting, and they're all, learning the mass, the structure of the mass.
Who's that? Who's there?
All right.
Is it probably not kids your age?
No, they're older people
Yeah.
that are like me that are wanting to court this idea of becoming Roman Catholic. So
I'm guessing you were by far the youngest.
I was.
Yeah.
And so they're, showing me the books, and I'm like, wait a minute, I memorized it, and it's like this. And I start going on.
You memorized, what were you looking at? And you said, no, it's like this.
The creed, credo in unum deum. I was like, what are you doing? You're saying it.
From the books that you found.
From the books.
From when you were 9, 10, 11, 12.
Yes.
And you were correcting them. It's not clergy. What's the right term for the leadership?
Teachers.
The teachers.
Yeah. I was like,
wait a minute, guys. Hold on.
I'm like, how is this?
And you were speaking Latin to them.
Yeah. I was like, this is
Their
none of
jaws
the
must
creed.
have been on the floor.
And they're like, what planet did you come from? I was like, I don't know what to do now. What am I supposed to do? I learned the Latin. I learned the Mass the way it used to be. It's called the Tridentine Rite, which is the Latin.
Yeah.
They were learning from after Vatican II, which is a new structure, and it was in English, and the priest faced the people versus facing the east toward the altar.
When did Vatican II kind of become the norm? Year-ish?
Yeah, it came
when did it
around
switch?
back then. See, my history is a little off, but somewhere in the 60s or 70s, I would place it somewhere around there.
Okay.
So they're like, what planet did you come? So I said, it's okay. Just give me the book, and I'll try to learn it and memorize it in the way you have it. But I was just like, okay, I have to figure out how to learn this again, because I was learning and memorizing the chants that my cousin had on cassette tape.
Right.
So, interestingly enough, right after I became Roman Catholic, I straight away was invited to go into a convent, because I told Father Bob Gratterati at this time, I said, listen, I became Catholic so I could become a nun, because I know I want to marry the one that I met at 9 years old.
Right.
And he said,
how old are you when you officially became a Roman Catholic?
This was, I think, around sophomore year.
Okay.
I was studying into it. So I would say somewhere around 16 and a half, somewhere around there, 17. So
what does that entail? Because I grew up, I guess my grandfather was a Protestant preacher, so Protestant and Baptist. So I know that path, it's the Lord Jesus thing. I don't know what is the path for, okay, yesterday I was not a Roman Catholic. Today I'm a Roman Catholic. What happened?
Okay. So during the ceremony on Easter, which they call Easter, but it's really supposed to be a Pascha. But anyways, we do the best we can here. They would accept you in baptism and then chrismate you. So basically that's, at this point it was like just spraying water on you. Or if they ran a pool for others and they would dunk people in the pool, and then they would come by, and the bishop would seal you with special anointing oil on that day. Okay. So it's confirmation, or chrismation is the word they use for that. So I was already, as a premature baby, baptized, though. So they accepted that. They said, oh, well, you don't have to be baptized again.
Baptismal certificate at birth. Yeah.
Because I was a premature baby.
Right.
Okay. And so premature babies were, there were priests on hand back in the 70s, and they just went ahead and
just did it. Everybody just
baptized.
Did it.
Yep.
Everybody's doing it. Let's do it too. Doesn't mean anything, right?
Just spray the person and make sure they're baptized. Good for you.
That contract doesn't mean anything, does it?
Oh boy. Well, there's
we'll
more
get
to this.
We'll get there.
Yeah,
we'll get there. Okay.
There's a lot more to this.
So you become Roman Catholic, and they immediately invite you to
a convent in Still
which
River,
is not
Massachusetts.
Normal.
Well,
with your path, it was kind of normal, but traditionally that wouldn't be a normal path.
Yeah, no. They would just accept you in the Catholic Church, and you would go on your merry way. And my point was, I was becoming Catholic in order to become a nun. Right. Because that's what I thought I was supposed to do because of Sister Act. Mm-hmm. I'm doing the best I can with what I see, and...
So you're still in high school. You're newly Roman Catholic. They want to send you to convent immediately. Did you finish high school?
I did.
Okay.
So as soon as I finished high school, within a month or even less.
Where was the convent?
in Still River, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Beautiful group of women there. I spent 5.5 years there. Of course, the reason he sent me there, Father Bob, was because he knew I fell in love with the Latin, and that convent was still doing the old Latin Mass.
Oh, okay.
So very accommodating. This priest knew. He's just like, no, okay, so, she loves this, so let's see what we can do to help her to fit where she wants to go. And the prayers just fit hand in glove when I went there. And so it was like natural for me, like doing the prayers in Latin,
Wow.
So I was there for 5.5 years. It's a farming community and beautiful, just tremendous. The only issue is I started having more dreams. And one of which was I was before the Lord, and there was a huge white flag with a red cross on it, and he was sitting in judgment. It wasn't judgment over my soul, it was judgment over the use of my gifts. But it was still scary.
Yeah.
It was very scary. And I couldn't see Christ because he was so lit up that I could only know that he was the one sitting on the throne. And I was confused because I'm like, wait a minute, why am I being judged? And I just got on the ground and prostrated in this dream or experience or whatever it is.
Experience is a great word.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so just, Lord, what do you want me to do? And I said, I'm in a convent. I thought I was supposed to become a nun. I'm in the convent. What more do you want me to do, right? He says, I'm calling you to come apart with me into a deeper solitude. And I'm like, but this place isn't a cloistered monastery. It's not cloistered, which there's a separate understanding in the Roman Catholic faith. You have these things called apostolates, which are works, and monasteries or convents that are primarily active are the active apostolate. They go out, they might sell books, they might help the poor, open soup kitchens, so on and so forth. That's more active. The Lord was calling me to more of a contemplative approach, which is where you're behind walls, you're in this more cloistered setting, set aside, you're not out in the world. You're more primarily focused on dedicating large amount of times to prayer, exclusively.
Gotcha. Okay, wow.
So I'm like, okay, so I went to my Mother Superior. Go ahead.
Did you have before that happened, that experience, again, great word, was your faith, I guess, works-based? Did you think, I need to do these good works in order to be loved, succeed, become a nun, etc.? Because that's how it was structured?
I think there's a temptation to fall into that naturally.
Of course.
But after having that experience, I was even more revved up to, do
so
whatever it is.
That was invigorating for you?
Yes.
Okay.
But it was also driven in a holy fear, not a kind of fear that's like, okay, I'm going to go to hell if I don't do this. It's more like, what does the Lord have in store here?
Motivating. Yeah.
So I went and I was completely blunt and honest with my Mother Superior, Mother Teresa Benaway.
Yeah.
And we were very close friends. And she said, listen, let's take time and pray over this. If this is from the Lord, it will be revealed. She said, let's give you an extra holy hour, time designated for prayer, where you're set aside in the chapel and you pray for special intentions. She gave me a list of things to pray for, including this experience I had.
Are you praying in English and Latin at this point?
I pray in my heart with the Lord, but I was still during the ceremonies or the time set aside for prayer, Vespers, Lauds, the Mass, the liturgy, as some would call it. Those were in Latin exclusively.
Wow.
So my superior was very simpatico. She understood what I was going through. And she and I felt that we need to honor that. Like, let's test the spirits. Let's see, is this really, and she said, after a year, after you do these holy hours, if you still feel this in your heart, then we can't ignore that. We have to pay attention to that. And I'll give you my blessing to go in an upright, just manner, not be kicked out of the convent,
right?
But go with my blessing. And that did eventually happen. So after that year of prayer, I revisited my superior and I said, Mother, this is still in my heart and I can't make it go away. And so finally she's like, and my other superiors too were very sick to their stomach because I was the pet, like the wannabe nun.
Teacher's pet, yeah.
Yeah, and they named me Sister
Star-
Benjamin.
Star pupil.
So I'm like, this is my home and I love my home, but I had to go into the unknown and I had to go into the world and learn how to write a check. I didn't know any of that stuff. We didn't learn why we had to pay rent or, pay insurance to drive or what. None of it. I didn't even have my license.
You went from living at home to the convent.
That's right.
So, yeah, all that life learning stuff
escaped me.
Wow.
100%. Now, I did know how to do farming.
Right, yeah.
I knew how to feed the animals and,
So you're now 20, 21, leaving the convent.
With no experience at all.
No worldly experience.
No worldly experience.
Yeah. And
So
where did you go?
So a monk friend of mine situated me with a dear Stanley fellow that was wonderful, and he was teaching me how to drive with a van, Stan the man with the van. And so I learned, and I was able to get my driver's license, figure out, okay, and my uncle, said, listen, you're learning, you're new, you're out of the convent, stay with us for a while. And so I started to navigate and gently, I wouldn't say gently because it was like a crash course for me, but I was, doors were opening up for me. People wanted me to work in their place, and I was being treated very nicely in terms of, here, try working here, see if this is what you like to do. So I went through that, and I still frequented liturgy, but I did it at my home, a monastery, St. Joseph's Abbey in Spencer, Massachusetts, and I continued to nurture my spiritual life and nurture learning at the same time how to navigate the world so that I would be able eventually to live in a hermitage type of a setting.
What's a hermitage?
A hermitage is where you're set aside, just like what that vision prompted me to do, but you're living alone, but you would preferably be living close to a monastery, so you'd still be enjoying the practice of faith. So you're going to liturgy, you're partaking in the sacraments, so on and so forth. The sacraments are like the ritual, aspects of staying connected to the church. So at that point, I was coming up with ideas and a plan, but I kept them in my heart for like 8 months. I just kept, going to Mass. And any time where I wasn't working, because I was, learning different things and trying to figure out where I'm best suited to work in the workplace, I would spend every second I could in these side chapels at the monastery in Spencer, and it was beautiful. I mean, of course, they did the Gregorian chant, but it was in English. Mm-hmm. But still, every now and then, they might throw a little bit of Latin in there, so I was all right with that.
You being a Metallica fan, you're like, play the original.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what are you doing? I can't believe that. So
by this time, you had given up, I guess, for lack of a better term, becoming a nun, but with the blessing of your convent and the sisters and the leaders that were there with you, right?
To be more technical, you would still maintain being a nun, but it's going to be, instead of an active work, you're going to go and still be a nun, but you're going to have to do it in a private setting,
Okay.
like a hermitage.
Okay, versus like a sister act thing where you're all living together. Okay, gotcha. Okay.
To draw closer to the Lord in that silence, in that place of silence. So I'm thinking, okay, so in order to do this, I have to navigate. I have to figure out how to operate in the world so I can be self-sustaining. And there was provision for this in the Code of Canon Law. It was Canon 603, where one, if they're studying to be a hermit, then they can do so as long as they are, showing their exemplary, that they are living that life of virtue. Practicing the faith, going to liturgy, and so on and so forth. So eventually, a friend of mine, I didn't interact with any of the monks at the Abbey. For that 8 months, I didn't interact with any. I was just like, I didn't even barely shake people's hands during the sign of peace, I was focused. I'm like, no, I'm going to stay focused and just keep this thing in my heart. So a dear elderly friend of mine said, could you accompany me to the ladies' room, which is off, it's in another building away from the chapel. So I was like, well, of course, sure, let me help you out. And I gave her my arm and walked her up, and a monk opened the door, and he greeted with a very kind smile and she knew the monk and introduced me to the monk, and we started to talk, and it friendship straight away. We just became friends right away. And he's like, well, you gotta talk to this other monk. This is fascinating, because I was sharing a little bit of my journal entries with some of the things I was contemplating, relating to the structure of the church and how that works and the spiritual world. And so then I started to talk to another monk, and we hit it off straight away, right away. And so the monk was like, listen, both of them were very supportive and said, listen, you have a very special calling on your life. Continue to come to the monastery if you want. Come on, for suppers every Thursday night. And we just started becoming friends. 2.5 years later, they're giving me books. They're like, this is what the novices read. And they're giving me like this amount of books. And I'm over there during lunch break, like scouring through all the books, hiding in my car, reading everything and studying it. I mean, a lot.
Eating it up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so then at that point, unfortunately, that love, that wonderful fraternal love that's going on with this monastery, it went south in 1 second flat.
Okay.
And the essence of it is there was a priest that had written about the contemplative experience, and I was encouraged to speak with him. And he was an older gentleman. And so if you're going to become a hermit, the rule is to try to be connected to a priest that's elderly, that is righteous, that has good standing, and that knows the ins and outs. Because there's a lot of pitfalls in the spiritual world, the spiritual life of prayer. So I was encouraged to speak with this priest, and I spoke with him, and at one point he says, well, my schedule's, I don't have a lot of openings for more spiritual directees, but we'll keep it open, So I was like, okay, well, timing is important, so we'll keep it open. So it was more like this, come here, but go away. Come here, but go away. And it was not with just that one priest. It was indicative of a community element. So though there were certain monks that were my friends, they were trying to help me get up the ladder, so to speak, to gain this recognition so that I could ultimately get my vows by the bishop and under the Canon 603. So there's this ladder that's implied that you have to follow. And so these monks are on my side, and they're trying to help me get up this little ladder. In the meanwhile, I'm encountering strange things. And monks are now coming to me in my 20s, asking me to be their spiritual advisor.
Oh, my gosh.
I'm like, what's going on here? What
Wait
is
a
this?
Second.
I'm like, okay, so I said, what? I'm trying to get spiritual direction from you and your monks.
Yeah.
And I'm in my 20s, and I'm trying to get to Canon 603 where I could be approved as a hermit in the Diocese of Worcester, and I'm trying to follow through all this stuff, and you're asking me to be your spiritual advisor. And I said, out of obedience, if your superiors say that I'm supposed to do that, I will do it. But you need to ask them. And I said, I will admit this is very uncomfortable. And they wept. The monk was weeping. And I said, don't you have other priests here? This is when things started to click. There's something seriously wrong. There's something wrong here.
Really?
Yeah. Because I'm like, don't you have other priests that you could talk to? And they started to confess the kind of sins they were involved in. And I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on? And I'm like, don't you know that that's wrong?
wait a second.
I'm treating this in a simple way. Like,
Your
I'm not.
Mind must have just.
It was mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
So he went, this monk, and asked permission from his superiors, both of them, and said, listen, and their superior said, well, that's a good choice. You picked a good choice, but don't put pressure on her. She's still learning. She's still studying.
He asked permission from them if you could.
From his abbot and the prior, the second man in charge of the monastery.
If you would be his
spiritual advisor. Because I'm like, I'm not going to do it and say sure unless they give permission.
Yeah.
Because you're supposed to follow a chain command
right.
here.
Yeah, very much so.
So I'm like, okay.
You probably didn't think they were even going to say yes.
I didn't know what was going to happen. And furthermore, I didn't even think he would have the guts to ask. But he came back and said, well, they said it's a good choice, but...
And then that's when these confessions and things kind of started to unravel?
Things got worse.
Okay, how so?
Because now I'm starting to get inside scoops into the nature of the kind of sins
the veil is pulled back.
The monks were involved in. And not just monks, because there was other participants in these scenarios. So
Like
I'm now, in my innocence, collecting information that I'm not even supposed to know. And I'm not looking at it as intel. I'm looking at this as, no, there's a soul in front of me, and they're struggling, and what can I do to help them? But I'm not going to touch it if it's not in my charge to help. Mm-hmm. So at that point, then they start to circle their wagons, meaning the people in charge now realize that we've got a loose cannon for a couple of monks. It wasn't just one monk.
You being the loose cannon?
Monks were loose cannons, but they're afraid, the ones in charge, that I would become a loose cannon, which...
Because of what you knew.
Yes.
What was being shared with you.
Yes. So a plan was devised, and this particular elderly monk opened up his schedule to seeing another friend of mine for spiritual direction. And I said, well, he did say keep an open mind. So I said, well, you opened your calendar for another friend of mine. You're an elderly priest. Okay, would you like to work with me? He says, well, why don't we meet on Thursday? And I was on retreat there at the monastery. And I met with the priest, and we had a very long discussion. I read his book. We were talking about the contemplative experience, and I've studied Tao Te Ching and all that. So I had some background to see some contextual things in his book, doing some comparisons. And at the end, and he's opening up the Song of Songs, which is the greatest love story, the love book of, it's smack in the middle of Holy Writ, and it's about the love of, Solomon and all of that. So he starts emphasizing this, and he's talking about women's breasts, and I'm thinking, okay, this is another one that's a little loop-de-loo. I'm like, what's going on here? There's something going on here, because now we got monks, we got another monk, and then we've got this guy. And I'm like, you know what, don't judge it. The guy's old, let him be. And he says, well, we'll probably carry on having more spiritual direction sessions, but you would have to agree not to frequent this monastery anymore because there's a younger monk who is attracted to you. And I said, well, that's not my fault. When there was a monk that told me, he was an elderly monk, that he was attracted to me, I shaved my head and immediately put on a habit. And I'm like, I'm not here for that. I'm here for this. Just one thing. I'm not on to the other stuff. So that's when more strange stuff. And then that was the day that the priest lunged out and grabbed my left breast. And that's when I'm like, okay, he's not even, this doesn't make any sense, because this isn't like how could you get pleasure within 3 seconds of grabbing a body part?
Was this in the same meeting as the Song of Solomon book?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So he was working his way up to that. And it was a couple of hour meeting, give or take. I have documentation for all the specifics on it, but anyway.
Jeez.
So I'm like, okay, so now I'm like, everything I fought for to become a nun now is going to be in question, because it's going to be my word against his word, and I can't just acquiesce to that.
Right.
And he says, well, maybe we should have more meetings. And I said, no, we're done. We're not having any more meetings. And then that day I went and told another monk, and the other monk said, don't do anything about this. If you do something about this, it's not going to work out for you. And I said, are you threatening me? I said, you're threatening the wrong one. This isn't going to be good, because now we're done. It's over. We're done. Meaning...
Who's we?
Meaning, if it's my word against his word and the superiors won't do what's right and you're threatening me, which tells me that you know something about the superiors. You're telling me that they're not going to be open, to resolving this. Yet, in my ignorant mind back then, I'm like, oh no, let's keep trying to resolve this in the right way silently.
Right.
And so that whole story is already told. I've done over 260 hours of interviews out there on this subject matter. You can get the inside scoops of this, because it's not all on YouTube anymore. But on BitChute, there's a channel, Sister Space Curie, Keri, Sister Space Curie. You go in there, you can get some, probably 40 interviews there. You can do more research, but I've been out there telling the story on that element. So I outlined that as the past, and why I wept is because the Lord Jesus in his body, which is not in the parameters of just a building, it's in the hearts of people that determines who is the body of Christ, those who receive him, and so on and so forth. There's a mystical body of Christ. And it's not who belongs to a church building, it is who belongs to a kingdom. So I find out, and I go up the food chain to finding out, okay, so I went to the superiors, I tried to resolve it peacefully, and they went sideways on me. And then I went outside.
Like, we knew something's been going on. It's not just you. You need to be quiet.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then it became threats. And then it became my phone was being tapped. I went to Chief Aram Termasian. I talked to him about it. He says, you're in over your head. I'm like, what does that mean? You're supposed to have a court order to tap my line? I said, and then I was talking to...
So hold on. So you're going up the chain of command
Yep.
in the Roman Catholic Church in your local area.
Yes.
It gets to the point you can't get anywhere with them. You go outside of the church to a police leader,
Yep.
chief,
Yep.
and he says, stop. You don't know what you're doing.
You're in over your head.
head.
Now, that was after I lost the court case because the whole court case was thrown.
Right.
And I went and I read the ABA model rules for that. I found out the attorney wasn't representing me and that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts it wasn't me against the priest. It was
Right.
me in a capacity that I didn't know I had.
What was that capacity?
Capacity was a slave.
Oh.
Somehow, the Roman Catholic Church had a perspective on a secret but true policy that we are slaves and their property in accord with their teachings. And again, I'm not beating up on Roman Catholics. The ones that love the Lord Jesus, the ones that are on the same list, like the Southern Poverty Law Center target list, those are good people. Those are the ones, like Cardinal Vigano, the people that are sticking up for the truth, protecting the babies and so forth, and all that. They're the good people. They're the good ones. They're the kingdom citizens, right? When I went through the system and went into...
Was that your first time being in court?
Yes. That was scary.
Yeah.
And when I saw how everything was unfolding, it didn't make logical sense because I was under penalties of perjury telling the whole truth, and they were lying. And even the priest, I felt bad for him, the one who did it. He was yelling in the hallway, I don't want to do this. And they drugged him up. He was shuffling in like he could barely even walk. And I'm like, okay, there's something else going on. Well, as time moved on, this was before the Boston cases hit with the sex stuff with the Catholic Church.
Yep.
So the offense that occurred with me was in 2001, and then I started to go in deeper and deeper and analyze it and go deeper and deeper. So I found out that, okay, went to the district attorney. No, I didn't. Someone else called and told the story, and then I was compelled to be a witness for the Commonwealth against the priest, which is bad business, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
So I lost the case because they completely lied, and the case was thrown. I brought in evidence that proved who I was, proved I was a nun, proved I was pursuing the religious life, and I'm not some kind of fan that was following the priests or whatever, or someone that's overly obsessed.
You weren't who they were saying you were, essentially.
Exactly.
And here's the proof.
Here's the proof.
And they didn't care.
They're like, no, you can't enter that in as evidence.
I can't see.
And they were
can't see you.
sequestering. They can see.
They can't see you.
They can see you. So, and thanks be to God, all this stuff happened. It's not easy. This journey isn't easy, but I am so thankful that priest reached out and touched someone, because there was a touch that went back, and it didn't go to that priest.
Right.
All right? That priest, when he was dying, I knew in my heart he was on his way out. And I sent a friend of mine into his hospital room. It's in my book, Divine Challenge, which is probably no longer on Barnes & Noble and Amazon. It used to be up there. But anyway, we might bring that back into print. So my friend went in, and I said, I called the monastery, and I said, what's going on with Father Joseph Chu Kong? And they said he was rushed to the hospital this morning at 3 a.m. I could feel it. And I'm like, and they're trying not to tell me too much, but I had allies on the inside of the monastery still, and they were angry at what happened,
Right.
but they were still victimized because of it, and they can't get out of the system because they're stuck in it.
Right, exactly.
So at that point, I said, I'm not going to disobey. I'm not going to go in the hospital room, but I will have a friend of mine go in for me. And I said, please tell him to go in peace, ask for forgiveness from the Lord. Tell him I forgive him for what he did to me and for lying under oath. But now his problem's not with me. His problem's with the Father.
Yeah.
And I said, ask Jesus to forgive you. Go in peace to the Father. And he died.
Wow.
So it's interesting because I cared more about his soul than the institution did. That's how you knew. I knew. I was like, there's something wrong here. So I started to study, study, like as if my life depended on it. So I started to study.
What were you studying?
First, I was studying on the typical law that we're introduced to, not the special stuff. We'll get to that. The typical stuff. And that's when I read the ABA model rules, and I was like, oh, Rule 8.4. And I started quoting, and I'm like, wait a minute. This was an intelligence gathering session. The district attorney works for Rome, for the Vatican.
How'd you find that out?
I started to, first, I had to deconstruct what happened in the courtroom that day. So I ordered the transcripts, the court reporter. And then I went and I started to ask for the police records. They wouldn't give me the police records. I had to go all the way to the attorney general and say, listen, they're not giving me my files. They're saying I don't have a right to it. Mary Sawicki in district attorney's office. No, you don't have rights to that. Really? My name is on all that paperwork. But they're trying to drop clues here. Mm-hmm. So I went against the attorney that represented the Commonwealth, thinking they're representing me, but that wasn't true. But this was all part of the gloriousness of learning how the system works. Because you can't fix it unless you know what the heck happened to you. So at this point, I go in and I to the district attorney's office. I say, I'm not leaving here until you give me my papers. And I said, by the way, I want you to turn your attention. I'm going to help you out. I want you to turn your attention to page such and so. It was 3 or 5 or something. And I said,
you're saying this in the state AG's office?
Yeah, yes. District attorney's office, this one specifically.
Or sorry, district attorney. Yeah.
Attorney general wrote me a letter and said, if you keep running into problems, I will make an action against the district attorney. Well, in that district attorney, there was a Mary T. Jean in the past who actually was successful in federal court getting an injunction, what was it, a restraining order against all the state police and the district attorney. So that's how horrible.
And you uncovered that through this research and fact-finding and getting all these paper trails.
I went to the court that day. I met Mary Jean when I was going to Beacon Hill to the State House, and because I'm trying to figure stuff out. So bishopaccountability.org, and I met those people, and I said, for some reason, you guys are uncapping what's going on in Boston, but they're not letting us uncap what's going on in Worcester. I have no idea why. And then I met with Mitchell Garabedian, the character in Spotlight, the movie, the actual attorney that went and supported the victims of the clergy abuse against the Archdiocese of Boston. I met him face to face, and I told him my story, and he says, oh, yeah, you've got a multi-million-dollar case. I said, will you please take the case? Because I went to Craig F. Eni, and I started to pay all these attorneys, like, okay, here, I need your help. I want to go in a civil suit because I have the proof that my case was thrown. And could we do this? And so within a day, Iannini writes me back and says, no, don't send us the money. We can't take your case. I'm like, ooh, what's going on here?
Wait a minute.
Why?
We won't take your case.
We won't take your case. Then when I went and talked to Mitchell Garabedian, I'm thinking he's the man. He's going to get it done for me, right? God is the one who had to do it for me because the stuff I encountered was much more than an attorney could handle, all right? So Mitchell tells me, you have a multi-million-dollar case here. The damages are, I was like, well, will you take it? He's like, hell no. I was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean you won't take my case? Because I listed the parties. I ain't going near that with a 10-foot pole. I was like, what do you know that I don't know? He's like, no, have a nice day. He walked away. And I'm like, if he will go after the Diocese of Boston, Archdiocese, why won't you deal with this?
Should be a walk in the park for you.
No problem.
Yeah.
So I'm on Beacon Hill, and I'm standing for, statute of limitations, extend those things and get the immunity clause out of there and all that, and let's get some relief for these victims of clergy abuse. And I'm going deeper and deeper. And Stobierski, John, walked up to me and he's like, "Oh, are you Sister Kiri Bernor?" I was like, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm Attorney Stobierski, and I understand you had a problem with the monastery." He says, "I need your help." I said, "I'm not helping you on a witness stand." I was creamed.
Yeah.
I said, "But I'll help you behind the scene." So we met a couple times, and I gave him information, and he won his cases.
When you said you're going deeper and deeper, are you literally reading case law?
I was studying case law. I was in the political realm. I was studying the global aspect of law. I was then, at this point, in 2007, connecting to Greg Szymanski, who was the entryway into journalism. So he was a journalist, and he did lots of stories all over the world. And then Greg Szymanski started to put me in touch with other whistleblowers, like Illuminati defectors. And so I'm like, okay, so now the pieces are starting to come together. Because when I issued a bar grievance against the attorney, and I called the heads of these universities in the law universities in Boston, and they read my stuff and said, "Did you study law?" I said, "No, I'm learning this by myself.
You're doing this all pro se. No attorney will definitely not go into court with you. You're doing all of this from scratch. Pro se on your own.
Yeah. Without a clue. And pro se or appropriate persona, I didn't even know the difference between that back then, right? But whatever I was doing, I was just trying to do it and try to figure it all out. And I'm, so Mitchell says no. So I'm like, okay. Somehow other people know stuff, and I don't know anything.
Was your phone still tapped when this was going on?
It was every time I would get to an office.
Yeah.
Everything I tried to set my hand to, they were already there before me, and they would close the doors. So that's
Who's they?
Specifically the DA's office. Okay.
Okay.
So that's when I said, "I'm not leaving here," and I showed him the letter from the Attorney General from Massachusetts, and I said, "If you don't give me my paperwork, I'm having him come after you." And I forgot the gentleman's name. What a lovely gentleman. At the time. And she's looking at me with big eyes, and I'm like, "Look, I'm not here to threaten you guys. I'm not even trying to do that." I said, "I'm just a nun. I'm just a nun. I want you to direct your attention to page 3 or 5 or whatever it was in the police report." I said, "Please read that." She reads it. She's like, "Look." And I said, "Yes, you can show it to the other secretary. Show it to her." I said, "This is why they told you not to let me have this paperwork. Do you see in the police report, I learned of another victim whose boob was grabbed, who went to the same convent that I went to, and the monastery circled their wagons and talked to her to not have her come to the court in support of me, because they said, "We'll handle it, we'll take good care of it." But once they got with me in the courtroom, because I was trying to resolve this privately, the only reason I learned about this other woman who got their boob grabbed was because I went to a monastery in Petersham, and the dear nun that was telling the truth, was punished severely for it. The dear nun that told me the truth, she's like, "We can resolve this in-house, let's do it." I said, "Good, let's resolve it in-house. All we need to do is have the priest no longer work with women. It's easy.
Right.
Why can't they fix it? This institution's supposed to be 2,000 years old. Can't they not?
Not the first time this has happened.
Can't they not work with women? Isn't that simple?"
Right.
Right? That's all we're asking. I'm not asking for money or any of it.
Yeah.
Simple, easy, right? It's not about that. It's about power. So I go back to the monastery, St. Joseph's Abbey, and I find out there's other women meeting with this priest, and the lies upon lies are happening. So he's still meeting with women, and I'm trying to settle this outside of court. But then when I realized, I'm like, you know what? He's not doing the right thing. I had to go with the district attorney, and that's when the whole case was foiled. And then, of course, after the foiling, that's when I started going deep into the law. I went against Attorney Murata. I left a trail behind me. I had no idea that goes on as insurance back then.
Let me pause you for a second. Obviously, the result of that first trial case, whatever, you said this is not right. This should not have happened.
Not at all.
Most people would say, okay, I guess it's meant to be. it is what it is. The attorneys tried, whatever the excuse we tell ourselves. Yeah. What do you think about that experience? You went completely the other direction. You said, no, this isn't what should have happened at all.
No.
And it sent you down, the result of that sent you down the path that you are on, right?
Good for you for asking that. This is where hearts are broken, and this is where spirits are broken, okay?
Court, you mean?
In any scenario where someone tells you demonically there's no remedy, get behind me, Satan. Because I read that Bible, and I know when I'm reading, I'm like, wait a minute. The Bible says that the righteous will stand strong, that they will have a remedy, and that God will win their battles for them. And I'm like, this doesn't look like a win to me. And if you're telling the truth and this one's lying under oath, then what kind of system are we under? And that's what prompted me to get to not the outer shell of the problem, but to the inner part. And that's where the studying of the law came in. And when I started to study law, and I mean heavily, and I still do study it, as you know, we both do. Thank God. And there's a maxim of law that says, lex dabit semper remedium. It means the law will always provide a remedy. So if there is a court that is not providing a remedy, you're in the wrong court.
Yep. It's not equitable.
And there's something else going on, and they believe you're something that you're... So here's when reality hit me, and I was thanking God. Finally, I got something I could hold on to. I got some kind of truth. So I went up against this attorney, and it hit the newspapers. And I went, and I was like, this is what he did, and he was overly serving the other side. My attorney for the Commonwealth, he didn't enter in my evidence. He did all this stuff, and I listed it in the grievance. And then I went in.
And this is through court, or this is through the journalist?
This was, I did do a procedure, the administrative procedures against this man using the Board Bar of Overseers, which eventually went to the Superior Court in Massachusetts. Just little old me up against this attorney. It's hitting newspapers.
No attorney, no lawyers
Nothing.
with you, just you.
Just me. And then the district attorney says that, oh, she's fostering an attitude or a lack of faith in the justice system. And I'm like, okay, so I'm hitting a nerve. Okay, good. And to eventually, when certain correspondences were sent, he didn't want to comment anymore in the papers about me. Because then he started to recognize I was starting to work with Mary T. Jean, who had inside scoops on what was really going on. Mary Jean headed the Worcester Voice back then. And that Worcester Voice was this incredible treasure trove of information about various victims of clergy abuse. And then I started to join groups like Survivors Network for those abused by priests. And then after that, I started putting the pieces together. I'm like, wait a minute.
This is all connected.
It's all connecting. So it's a matter of state interest to not allow a little nun to win against a big priest because the state owes its allegiance not to the people, but to Rome. And that's...
Hold on. Say that again.
Okay. I received a letter from, let's see here, the Superior Court, and the lady she was just wonderful. This letter was so confounding. She says, Ms. Bernor appears to be confusing the fact that it wasn't that Attorney Murata was representing her. Attorney Murata was representing the Commonwealth, and he did nothing wrong. And he did
his job in their eyes.
In their eyes, and that she said Attorney Murata was not representing her. That's when it went ding, ding, ding. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's something other people know that I don't know yet. So I said, we're done. I'm not fighting against Attorney Murata on this, even though it already did what it was supposed to do regarding his insurance. I didn't know that, and that's why the DA started to tap my phone, because even though I didn't know how to fight, I was throwing spaghetti on the wall. Well, my spaghetti was sticking, and it was working, and it was effectual, and I'm like, I didn't think anything was working, but it was working too well.
Funny how that happens sometimes.
I'm like, I would never ever even have engaged in any of this stuff if I really knew what kind of effect this had, because you would be just as normal. You would put your tail between your legs and run in the opposite direction if you had any brains. Me, I'm just pursuing the truth. I'm like, no, this isn't logical. I have to proceed until I can get to the truth. So then, that lovely board bar of overseers, the one in the Superior Court, I forgot her lovely name, but that letter was gold. And that's when I said, okay.
What about it was gold?
The part that was gold is when she said, Attorney Murata wasn't representing her. I said, then who was he representing? Commonwealth of Massachusetts is who he was representing. That's when I started to research.
He never had my best interest in mind at all through the whole thing.
Couldn't.
Even though, couldn't.
By law,
yeah, right.
He's not allowed to have my
Exactly.
interest. That's when we read Corpus Juris Secundum, right? Mm-hmm. We read the second edition where it says that attorneys have their allegiance to the court, not to the client. That's when we start digging and reading and going deeper. And then that's when I came across the Logan Act, a dear friend of mine, Christopher Strunk, and others. Mm-hmm. They put these things in front of me, and I'm like, wait a minute. Everyone, the Pope on his flag, he has 2 keys. He has a gold key and a silver key. The gold key is representative of the Pope's belief that he has the power over all the earth in their spiritual affairs. And the silver key is that in a Pope's belief system, he believes that he has control over all the world and all the earth in temporal matters. So spiritual and temporal keys of the Pope. That's when I realized, okay, the sovereign state of the Vatican, of the city-state, is now in my backyard. It's in Worcester, Massachusetts. That's why there was no remedy for me, because I was going against the sovereign.
You're speaking jurisdictionally.
Jurisdictionally, exactly.
So in this world that you're picking apart, you put the pieces together that the Vatican's Roman Catholic, whatever you want to call its influence, is not just that little piece of sovereign land. It's everywhere.
Spread everywhere. And it has nothing to do with just spiritual jurisdiction either. Mm-hmm. So when Mary wrote that letter, or not Mary, the other lady, dear one, that she wrote, that's when I was like, okay, now I have to go back to the drawing board. I got up, left. I moved from Massachusetts to Texas, and I studied 18 hours a day. And I mean, I went to work. And the joy in my heart.
What were you trying to accomplish?
I wanted to know what happened to me in that courtroom and why. And not only why did this happen to me in the courtroom, how do we stop this from happening? Not just for me, because...
It wasn't to be vindictive. It wasn't, I'm going to show these guys. It was almost a childlike wonderment of what the heck did I just see?
What did I step into?
Yeah.
If I'm a part of the Roman Catholic Church, what does that really mean?
The veil got pulled back for you at the church, and then the veil just peaked in the legal world, but they're so connected.
All of the worlds are connected, and even the legal world goes into other jurisdictions, which are not temporal. They're spiritual too. Mm-hmm. So now
you're in Texas.
I'm in Texas, and I start studying, and like I'm in 2009. I met with a Joseph Darlak, who flew 3,000 sorties in Vietnam. He's in intelligence. He was in the Air Force, and we would have several discussions. And then after speaking in 2007 to Greg Szymanski and even others like Leo Zagami, I had conversations, several with him. What happened was I got more and more layers, and I started to see, okay, so...
How did these people come into your life? Did you seek them out? Was it just divine intervention?
Good question.
I mean, these are not random people.
So mine was just a little boob grab that caused me to have to be challenged on my profession. Where am I going as a nun, right? There's others.
Impacted your entire worldview.
In my entire worldview. Yeah. But there's others that on Greg Szymanski's show, I started to listen, and there was a case, Alpern versus Vatican Bank. Attorney Jonathan Levy, a barrister, represented the victims of a genocide in Serbia. And I saw pictures, and I'm like, okay, is this internet nonsense? Mm-hmm. So I called Greg Szymanski about it. And I said, listen to me right now. Are these pictures real? With Franciscans and other kinds of monks sawing off the heads of Orthodox priest heads? What is this about? Greg's like, I got something for you. Here's the phone number. I'm going to get you on. We did a couple radio shows together. Barrister Levy told me, oh, no, that's not internet nonsense. That's actual real documents used that were declassified. And I said, you're telling me right now that Rome was involved. And he said, not only involved in a genocide, but that it was orchestrated. And it was the means, the behind the scenes, the reasoning behind these wars was to subjugate all countries unto Rome. And this is something that was a character of the Jesuit order. The Jesuits, I've learned about this. I was trained by people that were...
What is a Jesuit?
Jesuits, see, I didn't know this. I thought they were good. We were taught in the convent they're good, but a dear monk friend of mine told me, he said, a Jesuit is one who is trained for 16 years. And after the 16 years are done, if they're parachuted into a country single-handedly as one person, they could take over every political system, every economic system, every religious system, single-handedly do it. He's trained on how to do this. And I said, so how is that good? He says, well, I'm a believer, because this monk was Brother Alphonsus Maria. I'm like, well, okay, you're telling me the truth here. This is what the Catholics have believed for a long time. There's 3 ex cathedra statements, ex cathedra, from the chair of Peter that came down. And Innocent III says, we declare, say, define, and pronounce that every human creature must be subject to the Roman pontiff in order that he or she may be saved. Then Boniface VIII and Eugene IV. There's 3 dogmas that came down from the chair of Peter, which is this is paramount to gospel teaching. It basically says...
Put that in some historical reference, the chair of Peter. Where does that fit with kind of where we're at now, I guess?
So with the 2 key system,
right?
They're claiming the Roman Catholic Church's perspective on this is that the temporal key power over all the earth, we're supposed to give up our sovereignty to the Pope, because it's been divinely ordained that the Pope is supposed to have control over all the world systems.
And they operate as if that's assumed, right?
They do. Because no one resisted it.
Because nobody says anything.
Until a certain time.
Right.
Because there is a happy ending to all of this. But it comes off of that teaching where Jesus says to Peter, thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Well, it was the faith that Peter explicated in Christ's divinity, not that Peter was going to be the one with all this power in the temporal realm. If that was to be the case, the Lord Jesus would have summoned forth his angels and decimated Pontius Pilate right there and then. So that's nonsense. When people are saying, oh, thou art Peter, and upon this rock, now you're given all this temporal power. No, Jesus Christ would have took his temporal power, but he knew he was going to die under the 4th beast of Rome, and that he was going to have to wait another 2,000 years until he would be in proper seating in terms of his kingship. Not talking about someone who's going to sit on a throne in Jerusalem and rule from there. I'm talking about the kingdom age of the saints, which is a whole different thing. But as we're dismantling piece by piece what's going on, I realized that it was because of the birth certificate in 2009, several discussions with this military insider, that it was based upon the fact we were fused as surety for the national debt.
What's a surety?
Surety is one who owes a debt or is a slave.
It's a legal term.
It's a legal term. So that's when I started to study about the 1933 Emergency Banking Relief Act. I was studying this back in 2009 came across this Eugene Schroeder, who did an amazing explication on what it means to be a surety and why the military rule came into place since 1933. Our when that letter came and they said she's making a mistake, I was making the mistake in believing that we are that she was being represented.
Mm-hmm.
So who is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts then? And what was I in relationship to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? Bing, ding, ding, ding. It starts to hit. Oh,
So that led you to the birth certificate.
Yes.
Which led you to the Banking Act of 1933.
Yes.
How tie those together?
Okay. So if I was married as a baby to a piece of paper that's a security that's traded, and I was able to evidence that with a Series 7 broker, that's one of the reasons why when people approach us, why we have to go through the non-disclosure agreement, okay? Mm-hmm. It's because there's certain information that's still considered state secrets. And one of which is when you do get the bond numbers up from your birth certificate or your registration numbers or what have you, and you get that traced by a Series 7 broker, which is what we do. We've done that. Also with affidavits that stipulate that you do have an interest in that.
Oh, yeah. I've seen it. I've done it. It's real.
Then that proves that you are a slave and that you, unless, as surety, you're a commodity being traded on Wall Street. So Revelation 18 isn't in the future. It already happened. Revelation 18, they will sell incense and myrrh and goods and corn and then buy and trade in on the souls of men. That's already happened. It's been happening. The fourth beast, Rome, through these states, through London, okay, and then London, the Queen and so forth, that whole setup there, it's the trifecta, through District of Columbia. So when I studied about District of Columbia in 1871, the act causing them to be their own government body and how they took their jurisdiction, District of Columbia, it's no longer the city of Washington. 1871 made it a government, and then how did they take that government and slap it on top of us? Yep. Through the Buck Act, through all these other acts that caused us to have to use zip codes and all that other stuff. There's multiple ways.
It's layers. It's a giant onion.
And there's no way that was done by human ingenuity. That was fallen angels working through, helping write these laws, and slowly using the military arm of the Pope, which is the Jesuit order. They are a military order.
I want to go back to that.
Yes.
Let's go back, because I think this is a good time to tie in the Jesuit thing. Tell me.
So Jesuits were kicked out of several countries. Pope Clement XIV in the 1700s saw that the Jesuits were interfering with the affairs of state, and it wasn't earning any points with the papacy. It was actually competitive with the papacy's understanding of their sovereignty, and you're having all these other guys going around with levels of they're getting information, they're getting state secrets, mm-hmm. And Rome didn't want any competition, so Pope Clement XIV suppressed the Jesuits and put them under interdict and said, "Hey, enough is enough. You're underground. You're done.
He tried to dissolve them.
Yes.
But sent them underground.
That's what they did. So
right.
the Jesuits went underground, but what did they do? They infiltrated all of the Masonic lodges. And that's why all those degrees started shifting, the Masonic charters, all those, however you want to call it, it was shifting and changing to a different paradigm. So with regards to the Jesuits, Adam Weishaupt, if you already know about that, that's when the Bavarian Illuminati, basically got involved, and they took over, subsumed, and assumed the identity of the Masonic orders. And through the Masons, they were able to continue their work in subjugating basically propagating this New World Order.
Right. I hate that term, but it's
the easiest go-to.
Right, yeah.
It's just easier. So, and there's so many different legs to this octopus and all of that, but that's the essence of it. So the Jesuits are not some innocent little, no, there's a lot of good Jesuits. They're not all evil, okay? Not everybody knows. Not everyone's read in at those higher levels, so don't go, thinking everyone's in the same boat. Not everyone's in the same boat. It takes time. But there's a Jesuit oath that was in the congressional record, and later it was removed from there, but you can find it, There's works, Charles Chiniquy, he was a priest who saw the truth of Rome and warned Abraham Lincoln. And there's so many books out on this. You can get any of the books written by Charles Chiniquy. He warned Abraham Lincoln that the Pope was he was in the sights of the Pope and the sights of the Jesuit order. And so anyway, that's a whole other history. There's a lot of history. But the bottom line is when I'm thinking to myself, okay, so affairs that are happening in Rome, things that matter to Rome in their governmental system is taking place in the courts in Massachusetts.
Literally in real time.
In real time.
Yeah.
And how did this happen? And how is this not treasonous?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, wait a minute. But in this exploration, as I'm starting to study law, people start, oh, I need your help. And I was like, hey, if you want to be a guinea pig, go ahead. Just sign.
So people are asking for help. You're in Texas. You've just been through this huge thing, peeling back all these layers, and you're still figuring it out at this time. And people are asking you for help, and you're like, well, let's try some stuff.
Absolutely.
What did you start with?
So I started.
What was your? I know I have something here. What was your aha moment?
I knew if I ever could have known about this structure of law, the private law, I never would have lost in the court against the priest. If I knew that there was a public side of law and a private side of law, and that the public but false policy and the secret but true policy, if there was a way to balance that out, I would never have come in as a representative for the Commonwealth as their piece of property. I never would have come in as surety for the national debt. I would have made a sacred divorce with that. And that's, So I would have done special paperwork, and so I started taking on cases, one of which was a lady that she was falsely accused of kidnapping her own daughter. Mm-hmm. I said, well...
Because it wasn't her daughter.
Yeah, exactly. Property of the state. So I called her attorney, and I said, listen to me. I'm going to make you look good, but we have to do it this way. So we're going to send stuff into the judge, and we're going to send stuff onto the court record. But the court record, you can't put this kind of truth. We have to be careful because the judge wears different hats. So the attorney's like, well, this is fascinating. And the client, my friend, who was her client, said, okay, well, go ahead, try it out. And I said, I want you to add her affidavit on as part of the motion because it's admissible once it's attached to the motion. So she did it, and hands down, not only did she win her case, she was kicked out. She was no longer in jail, okay? And then on top of it, I added extra seasoning to the flavor.
Of the affidavit?
I went in and I called the FBI, and I got files against the guy that was alleging this against her and got his history on drug trafficking. and then we added that in, okay? So she got her kid back. And the guy that was the evildoer.
The DA? Was it a DA?
It wasn't a DA. I'm going to be careful with that. I don't want to say too many things because I don't want it to be identifiable.
It was a state. It wasn't private versus private. It was a state.
Yeah, it was a state
employee. Yeah.
Yeah. So
state entity.
The state entity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So the state entity freed my friend, and the evildoer, the ex-husband, he was put in jail. Or in prison, actually, to be more accurate, because I brought in federal laws because of doing stuff over state lines. So I was like, okay, this stuff works. I think I'm figuring it out. Right? So I'm like, okay, there is a public side and there's a private side. So now how does this work? So the public side is the corporation. It's the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. All right, for example. Whereas Massachusetts state is the republic side. And then I started to study more about the law, and that there's Hale versus Henkel about the private citizen, which I came across papers like that in 2009 or 10 through Christopher Strunk. And it talked about that there's some people are more equal than others. That's how I was able to figure it out. The priests that went against me, they were more equal than me. In other words, they had a higher status than I had because they were diplomats, considered diplomats under the Vatican.
Legally.
Okay? Legally.
Yeah.
In the eyes of the law. Whereas if I knew the law, knew and understood it fully, I would have completely dealt with that scenario totally differently, completely differently. So my experiment worked. So then I did another experiment, and we have another some girl calls, she's crying, oh, our study friend is in jail, prison. And I says, he calls me from, the prison and horrible sounds in the background. I'm like, look, I'm happy to help you. Just sign hold harmless and indemnity because I'm not practicing law without a license, but let's just see what happens. And he says, you can't make it any worse than it already is. Because, he went into court. He aggravated them so badly that the judge actually had them put a paper bag over his face while he's trying to talk. I said, number one, stop talking.
Yeah.
Stop, because what you're saying it's not helping. It's making it worse.
Yeah, you're making it worse.
We have to file paperwork first. So in the middle of all this other rigmarole, within a year and a half, he was supposed to be in the clink, whatever. That's what we called it. I think 13 years for securities fraud. So there was certain paperwork that was done, and...
But you didn't know it was going to work. You're like, let's try it.
I didn't know if it was going to work, but I said,
This should work.
It should work.
Let's try.
Let's try.
Okay.
And he did. He signed the thing. No problem. You can't make a blunder out of this. It's so bad you can't make it worse for me. He was the one that when he was in prison and they all did their vaccines, get to the end of the line. So he had to go to the end of the line. And then by the time it was his turn to get vaccinated, get to your cell. So they didn't touch him. Because then instead, if the government can do it, so can we. So if the USA Incorporated, through their little states that have Dun and Bradstreet numbers, like Commonwealth of Massachusetts or state of, whatever it is, state of Utah, whatever it's going to be, all we have to do is do the same thing they're doing, but we can take control back over ourselves by saying, no, we're not surety for the national debt.
We're not lost at sea.
We're not lost at sea.
We're not incompetent.
We're not incompetent. And because he was in a situation and I had to be power of attorney for him, he couldn't do anything. It was so hard. So I basically made him property. I turned him into property, but not property of the state. I made him property of himself, but I had power of attorney over him. Right. For different situations, you can't. There's no cookie
You basically
cutter.
just played the Uno reverse card. You did the same thing to them, but for a righteous reason.
Absolutely.
It's pretty funny, actually.
So then, afterwards, and Lord have mercy, experiment worked. So 2 days before Christmas, I got a call. After a year and a half, he's in there, and I was struggling with health issues. I had a couple surgeries. I was going through a lot of stuff, but I still just kept up with it. And he called me 2 days before Christmas. They kicked me out. I'm out of jail. Can you come pick me up? I said, you're on your own. You're on your own. I helped you.
He was in on a 13-year. He was sentenced to 13 years. And they just one day came in and opened the door and said, you're not allowed to be here anymore.
Well, I finished all the paperwork, and then at the end, I wrote to the judge one paragraph. I said, you are ordered. I'm not asking. You're ordered. Now, I didn't do it because I was power of attorney for him, the individual.
Right.
But he did it.
Legal terms,
yes.
In the judge's eyes, he did it.
He did
Your
it.
friend who was in jail.
Exactly. So I have to be careful with that.
Yeah.
And it said, you are hereby ordered to discharge the property forthwith. And I described the property. So he was kicked right out, get out, 2 days before Christmas. And I said, you're going to have to thumb it back home because I'm in another state. I can't help you. And he was so happy. He's like, I'm coming home for Christmas.
I ran home, yeah.
So he's another one. So I'm like, okay, my experiments are working. But then I started noticing, as I'm learning,
This is about 2010-ish, 2011, somewhere in there?
Somewhere around there.
Okay.
As I'm learning, and because I had like 7 different things I was studying at the same time, and I mean full time for each of them, the government or the other side was starting to switch and change the laws and the rules. So every time it's like, every time you get closer to figuring out how to fix it, they kept trying to close the doorways off.
Move the goalposts.
Move the goalposts.
Yep.
Exactly. But I'm like, I already know this is it. So then I helped out a lot of people. But then here's the little wrinkle that happened. As I'm trying to help people,
This will come up later, but you weren't really looking at status then.
I was.
You were?
Yes.
Okay.
I was studying in 2009, Dr. Eugene Schroeder.
Okay, so that was on the radar.
Yes. So I knew status, and I was using myself as an experiment to figure out how to do it at the Department of State. But Department of State got aggravated with me, and they wrote me back, if you keep sending us this was in 2013. I tried. I'm just figuring this out, right? Back then. And they said, well, if you keep doing that, we're just going to, we're not sending you a passport, we'll throw it away or something like that. And I was like, okay, obviously I'm missing a piece here. So I said, I will take further study into this before I make my request known. And then years later, in 2017, it hits me on how to do the passport properly. And that's when I'm like, okay, now is time to roll out my experiment. But now I'm not just going to bring in certain elements relating to the surety issue. I'm going to bring in another element, because there's a lot of people out here that are doing this kind of work, and I commend them, okay? There's a lot of people doing it. The only issues I'm having that makes my process very different from everyone else's is I'm addressing things at a level of treaty. I'm addressing things at a level that is not with the temporal only, but I'm dealing with the spiritual, because that's the secret part.
Exactly. And I really want to go into that part. For my 12-year-old son who adores you, if you were explaining status to him, what is status?
Okay. So status is a special, it's standing, okay? And in front of God, it means righteousness, right standing. In the legal systems that we were brought up on, they took our standing as sons and daughters of God, and they polluted it and said, no, you're sons and daughters of the state, and you are now property of the state.
Automatically.
At birth.
The mother's signature, literally, help me with the terminology. Informant on the birth certificate. Yep. It's right there.
It's right there. She signed you over. And she married the obelisk in D.C.
Yes.
So the man is gone. Okay, the man, the husband, the daddy, gone. It's the obelisk
it's never
now.
there, yeah.
So now you got the government in bed with the mama, and the baby is the bastard child of the government and the mom. It's a hybrid. The baby's a hybrid. Why? The angels who fell from their first estate, 1 Jude 6, it talks about how the angels fell from their first estate and are reserved into everlasting chains under the earth. Okay? Now, when they fell from their first estate, they left the celestial realms and came and lusted after women and had babies.
Human women, yep.
And their babies were hybrids, and that's where we get the giants. Now, they did the same thing to the mom. The mom, legally on speaking, paper, using paperwork as a hex, vex, or a spell or charm, bewitchment, assignment, all right? What they did is they took that piece of paper and they hybridized the baby's soul, the child, and married, because the mom gave it away, and married the soul of the child to the birth certificate, and it's married and it's wedded. It's secured. It's bonded. It's literally bonded.
Literally, yeah.
Okay? What we do is we separate the bond, and we say no.
Would you say that's correcting the record as well?
We correct the record.
Okay.
We
fix the assumption.
we bring it back. We rebut the presumption,
Right.
and we say, no, that is an account. So that all caps name on the birth certificate, the name of war that was used against us, is now, that's an account. Are you a U.S. citizen? I hold U.S. citizenship. How can I help you? I'm not a U.S. citizen, but I hold it. It's an account. But who am I in relation to that account?
That concept that you just said right there is so mind-blowing. And I think there was a situation where this judge was getting very upset with somebody, and the judge had the driver's license, and he kept saying, "Is this you? Is this you?" And the living man wouldn't say. The guy didn't get upset at all. The judge was getting pissed, and he goes, "No, Your Honor, that's a piece of plastic. I'm me."
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't. So talk a little bit more about that, the rebutting the assumption and how we've just been conditioned to think, I am that piece of plastic, or the name. It's literally, you think, I'm not my name, I'm me.
And that's what they did. They wired us in these educational camps to believe that which is on paper is us. So we're agreeing that that's us.
Exactly.
Whereas when we're not in agreement with that, because, all right, so for example, I went before a judge and I brought this up, and I opened a case, my name, the name, all caps name, versus John and Jane Doe's 1 through 100, because I didn't know who the parties were that did this to me. I could throw a few stones at the idea, but I don't know who they are. So John and Jane Doe's, okay, great. So in court, I get in the first time with the judge. I walk in there and I'm like, wait a minute. The flag, the Texas flag, was removed, because I already went online to go see what does the courtroom look like.
Mm-hmm.
But the flag was removed, and the door in the back.
We could have a whole other conversation on courtrooms and how they're set up, but keep going.
It's gold.
So you had already filed paperwork. The judge had seen it. They literally changed certain things in this courtroom.
I sent in documentation in chambers to him because, again, I can't file certain things in the public record because the judge
in chambers
wears
is in camera, in private, directly to the judge.
Yes.
Doesn't go
I
on the
don't
public
mix
ledger.
the hats because there's two
can't.
different ledgers.
Right.
There's a public ledger and a private ledger, and the courts are nothing more than banks. So if a court is a bank, I'm not going to commingle the actions and the activities between the public and the private. So he left the door open, to chambers.
Yeah.
And there's still a huge amount of people in the back of the gallery. And I'm like, he's going to test me. He's going to see if I'm going to commingle in the public. This was the first time I met with the judge. So I'm like, I said, Your Honor, I am not comfortable talking about this stuff in front of people. They can hear what I'm saying. And I says, can we reschedule this? And he's like, well, of course. So that was the test.
Mm-hmm.
He removed the flag and he kept the door open. But he was going to see, was I going to take a private matter and bring it in the public where all those others could hear me? So he's like, okay. And he said, yeah, September 14th, 2018 is open. I says, great, let's do it. And then I sent him more stuff in chambers. I sent him the birth certificate, the Series 7 findings, the CUSIP number on the bond of that.
What year is this that you did
2018.
this? Okay.
And then I sent him the affidavit from the Series 7 broker that says that I do have an interest in this and that these numbers were checked against certain other ledgers. And I said, Your Honor, I'm not even claiming that these are mine. I'm just saying that there's obviously a mistaken identity here. I'm very careful because you could also be in big trouble, because if you created it, it's yours. But if you didn't create it,
you're not liable.
So I'm like, okay, it might be there for my use, but I know I didn't create it. So I'm not going to assign, certain use to myself right now. All I know is this is here, and So
is this before or after you personally figured out the process that you use now for status correction?
It was all
More
the
or less.
exact same time.
Okay.
Because I did it and it worked successfully, and then I'm like, no, I got to add more stuff to
You
it.
did it with the Department of State, with your passport, or in court, or both?
Both.
Okay.
But I didn't figure out the passport thing 100% yet. So what I did was, it was in process in my mind, but I didn't do it because I was thinking maybe the judge could give me more clues on what to do. So when I went in front of the judge, the second time I met with him.
Did you think that the birth certificate was, I guess, the linchpin in all this, and that's why you put it together and sent it to the judge? Or did you, trying to figure out how you differentiated, because everybody used to be birth certificate.
It's the CUSIP and the fact that I could prove that this all caps name was being traded, and I'm not receiving any of those funds. Yeah, if this is something, a trust that was put aside for me for later, I didn't receive anything. So people are trading on stuff without my permission.
Got it.
So I'm like, okay, there's something off here. I'm not privy to this, and I should be privy.
So part of correcting one's status is severing yourself, your living self, from that
account.
Financial instrument, that account.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I went in to see the judge the second time, nobody's in the court. The judge comes in the back, and he is wearing all white. No robe this time.
No Masonic.
No robe.
No robe. No Masonic robe.
And he has a blue tie, and he's got his coffee in his hand.
And you're in his chambers.
I'm in the regular court because the
there's
whole
nobody
court
there.
was empty. And in the other room where there's usually everyone waiting to come into the gallery, completely cleared, emptied, the whole building, except for just a couple clerks in the back. So then the lady that's the bailiff lady that walked in, she came in before I did. I'm there, and I'm sitting in the pew, whatever it's called, and I'm sitting in there, and the lady comes up. Oh, the judge is going to help you today. She's like, this sounds interesting. I was like, oh, I'm really fascinated.
Was there a court recorder there?
I believe it was she, the lady.
Okay.
And no, you're right. There was one with a gun, and then there was another one at the type.
Yeah.
Okay. But when the judge came in, I'm waiting for the guy to come up from the front with a black robe on, but he came from the back, from the same door I came from.
Oh.
And he has his coffee in hand. He's like, "Come on down." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's the judge. I remember what he looks like." And he was happy. And now I'm like, finally I can speak. I can tell him everything. We can have a discussion, and I don't have to worry about mixing public and private with him. I can honestly just speak from my heart. And it was the judge who...
Did you ask him, is this a private conversation, a public conversation, on, off the record?
I basically said...
You knew it intuitively, but did you say it or put it on the record at all if there was a recorder there, and just to verify?
I did say everything we're saying is special and private. And I said, I've indemnified this case, so you're allowed to speak freely. You will not be held accountable for anything that you're saying that is private. You're not going to be held accountable for that. You can operate with me constitutionally. And I said, could you go to your judge's jacket and open it? Because I don't know, I just got it there that morning. And I said, look at the birth certificate and look at the language. He says, oh, I appreciate that. I said, yeah, I've indemnified you so you can speak freely because I'm here. I really want to figure this out. He's like, well, I appreciate that. And then first words out of his mouth, obviously come on down with his coffee. He says, what is your pleasure?
Things you've never heard in court for $100, Alex.
Not at all. So I'm like, well, Your Honor, I have a spiritual problem. And he says, he's taken back by that. And I was like, my Bible says in Proverbs, which we're going to bring in the Bible because it is recognized, in the courts. But the Bible says in Proverbs, you shall not be a surety for a stranger, or you'll be injured because of it. Basically, you're a slave. All right, so you don't want to be a slave.
And that legal word is in the Bible.
Yes. Yep, surety.
A few times, yeah.
A few times, yep. So So the judge looks at me and I says, from my understanding and my research, and I said, you did receive also in the CUSIP and the bond and the birth certificate. I said, how do I help the government to see that I'm not that all caps entity? I mean, I filed some things in court way back in 2011, separating myself and all of that. But how can I be sure that I know that the government sees me separate from this entity, this all caps name of war? He says, so show me what you got. And of course, I printed out, I had my whole PowerPoint, and printed off in the panels. And I says, okay, so, and I held up my birth certificate with the baby foot on it, and I showed that that's apostilled, okay, not certified, apostilled, because that's foreign. And then I had the other birth certificate with my mother, with the corporate, state of Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that one was double authenticated. And I said, see, this one over here is foreign to the jurisdiction of the United States Corporation. This is the corporate, but yet I am the holder. I am the actual title holder to this.
Is that what some people call the long form?
Yes.
Okay.
So I said, I do have paramount security interest in this now because it's on the full faith and credit, according to Public Law 7310 and all these other HJR 192 and all that other stuff. I said, but I want to be sure that the government would see who I am. They're going to know there's a difference between me and that name. And I said, so if there's a controversy coming down the road later, not that I plan on to be in a controversy, but in case, how do I help the government see? And I said, you're not offering me legal advice. This is just a conversation.
It's a private conversation.
So he says, well, what authorities are you citing, to show the difference between you and this all caps? I said, first he asked me, well, why are you doing this? And I said, this doesn't count, but Downs versus Bidwell talks about Justice Marshall Harlan saying that he couldn't apprehend certain evil the day of constitutional, that the body of government would depart from the Constitution, and that the powers that would limit the government against us, limit the government, he's like, he could see something's wrong because he said something about the word incorporation, the evil he couldn't apprehend due to something happening around the word incorporation. And he said, there is an evil that is about, that could be occurring. This was 1906 now. He knew something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on it. And he says, okay. And I said, there's something wrong too. And I knew there's something wrong, but I can define it. That case is wrong. They're talking about two national governments. No, there was one government that Pac-Maned, that ate up, that subsumed and assumed the republic. And there's no seats in the republic now,
right,
at that time, I said, but how do we get back to who we are? And he says, okay, so what else do you have? And I said, I have Hale versus Henkel. And he's like, could you give me that? And I said, this is my PowerPoint. I need a bigger print. And he's like, can I have it? I said, of course you can. So I'm giving him all my papers.
This is in Texas, right?
Yes,
yeah. My
folders. And he says, so you have it. He says, the private individual, their rights are not resting on the state. So as long as the private citizen is not, interfering with other people's rights or the state, then their rights are recognized as a private citizen.
Wait, he said, you have it? Like, okay, I knew this. You just proved to me that you figured it out and you understand it. Or
Yes.
was he realizing it because of what you showed him?
He was waiting.
He was testing you.
He was waiting for me to say Hale versus Henkel, I think. Something he could just put his teeth into. He was looking.
He was testing you.
Yes. And and I said, I know that case hasn't been overturned, and that's the only one I can find. I said, I looked for, because I have a friend at the time that filed something else in another state, and they were able to actually get a decree. And I said, I looked in every Texas law there is, trust me.
A decree saying what?
A decree saying that the name is separate from him.
Oh, wow.
Right? And I was like, but Texas law, we don't have that.
Right.
And he says, I looked for you too, and you're right. It's not in there. I was like,
each state has
okay.
these many similarities, but
Yep.
many subtle differences too. Most of them have
nuanced.
Yes, very nuanced. Most of them have two constitutions. There's all kinds of crazy stuff.
Layers.
Many layers. So you're in. How did the thing end with the judge?
Beautifully. He just said,
What
listen.
did he get? Well, yeah. What was the result?
He says, I can't give you a decree because we don't have the same laws on the books.
Right.
He said, but you
that
do.
remedy doesn't exist here, but
Not now anyways. I'm like, So I'm like, all right, so what do I do? And he says, you showed me that you have papers that show that you are different from the birth certificate. He says, you showed me that. And he said, so I said, you're meaning to tell me that, he says, and you are who you are. And he asked me 3 times, like, what is your pleasure, right? And we talked for like an hour and something. And I'm on my tippy toes, stealing his pen, trying to write things down. And he's trying to push his computer to my direction so I could see it. Because he's like, I looked at the laws and it doesn't exist here. So I was like,
you're
all
in
right.
chambers this whole time, right?
Well,
or is this,
I'm at the
you're
bench.
out in the main. You're on the main area,
yes.
But it's just you two.
It's in chambers because of the
right.
jurisdiction, not the physical.
That's,
I think he was being sensitive to not make me feel weird about being in a room alone with him. I don't know. So, who knows, right? But so he says, you have everything you need. Then you've done your due diligence. He said, but if you need the court, if you find something new, you're welcome to come back. He said, but you have enough to show that there's a difference between who you are and what that birth certificate is. And he says, I wish you the best of luck. And he was so friendly. And we were learning from each other. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was fascinated with the stuff that I was sending in chambers. Like,
yeah.
He was like, So at that point, because I already tried some other things with the with the Department of State, but I wanted to make it mine. Like, I wanted it to reflect who I am as an ambassador for Christ, because proclamation, I think it's 5013 under Reagan, 1983 was proclaimed the year of the Bible. That's in the Federal Register. So I'm like, okay, why would Reagan make the Bible the law? How is that possible? If the USA Incorporated, the corporate U.S., could offer an extension of that kind of a relationship, a treaty, if you will, with people of biblical heritage. So that's when I started to examine that further, and I was like, okay. I walked right into the Department of State. They saw the way I was lining out things, which I'll get into that.
So we're going back to you still fine-tuning, how do I correct this status?
Yes, because I'm like, okay, the judge couldn't give me a decree. If he would have gave me a decree, I would have added it to my Department of State form.
And did that kind of put to bed, okay, I got the birth certificate. That's not the key to this thing, so let's look at the passport.
Yes. I mean, the birth certificate...
Because both those documents are in their world. They can see that.
Yes.
And we can't really... You couldn't go any farther with the birth certificate.
Not in the court. Why? Because the court is a judicial process.
Exactly.
The mistake was made administratively.
Right. So then you flipped it over to the Department of State, the DS-11, administrative.
So, and excellent questions, by the way. Very good. So there are others, because the judge said, well, maybe you want to get a name change. I said, Your Honor, I can't get a name change because I have papers lodged in other courts saying that this isn't my name. This is property of the United States. He's like, oh, okay. Like he was getting it. I was like, no, I'm not condemning anyone else who wants to do their name change or whatever. There's so many different ways to approach this. As long as you know what you're doing in your heart, you got to do it.
That's
but for me,
so important. Yeah.
And I don't condemn. Like, others they're gonna do the best they can with what they know. I have to follow my own journey. And my journey said, no, that's not my name. And the only reason I knew that is because I sent in a medical bill saying this name and number is not property of the United States. Please send it care of owner to the Treasury. And they zeroed out my medical bill because I said this is under the usufruct, under military law. I said, I'm using it, but
speaking specifically about the name.
My name.
The name in
or
all caps.
The name, right? The name,
Yeah.
right? So I said, okay. So I ran that experiment, and it worked. And Quest Diagnostics sent me back a thing saying, you're no longer financially responsible for this invoice. They did call to test me. They called me to test me to see, well, why did you send us this? I said.
Is this where Nectaria was born?
Nectaria was born during my baptism in the Orthodox faith in 2008. So because
Where'd that name come from?
Nectaria comes from Saint Nectarios, and I was named Saint Nectarios because he's a saint who, there's a movie out on him. He took church abuse and turned it into a means for propagating the gospel, for preaching the gospel. He didn't use it to run away from the church and hide and say, I don't like all of them, they're mean to me. He took the sufferings of the fourth beast that was mixed together with the church, fallen beings, people, and the fallenness of that part of the church, of, I would say, I don't want to use church because it's organization. And instead of running away, he used that to serve them even more. Wow. So, powerful story.
You picked that name, or that was given to you?
A priest walked me into some kind of a gift shop, and he says, so which saint do you want to have for your name when you become Orthodox, baptized Orthodox? Because after the Roman Catholic Church and then all of that, I was like, okay, wait a minute. Why? That caused me to ask even more, and I've done a lot of presentations, we could do a lot of them, on why I went into the Orthodox side of this. But again, my brothers and sisters that are Roman Catholics, it doesn't matter. We're kingdom citizens, period. It's not about a church.
We'll get there. Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Not about that. They've failed, in my opinion, meaning the counterfeit side of it, not the true side of it. So the church is a government body, so remember that. We'll bring that up later. So the baptism, when I got baptized, the priest invited me into this room and said, pick out an icon. And I said, I don't know who that guy is over there, but that's the picture that's, like radiating in the room. And he proceeds to tell me the story about Saint Nectarios. And he says, well, that's probably your name then.
Wow.
And
that's so cool.
And he knew about the suffering that I went through in the Roman church, this priest. And then when he told me the story about Saint Nectarios, I was like, that's the one. Now, he took it on the chin, okay? Saint Nectarios took it on the chin, but when he died, someone just went to touch the sheets, and they were sick, very sick, dying themselves, and his sheets, his own, just where he was laying for the final hours of his life, that person was completely healed. So he took his suffering, and that energy was shifted. It was metamorphosed into a healing energy.
Wow.
And that's what I'm praying to do. Back to the Lord chained to the floor. The body of Christ. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of this, but I knew it was coming, where there was going to be a genocide on all the people. I knew there was going to be a genocide. And after I studied about the Serbian genocide, I went deeper into how the Roman Catholic, the evil side of the Roman Catholic curia, the prelates and all that are controlled by fallen beings, what they were planning relating to COVID. And I had information from the Department of Defense back in 2013 that nanodomestic quell record. And I started to connect with others, and that's a whole long story, but the bottom line is I was warning people within government. How would I get access to people in government? That happened as a result of my discussions with the journalist, and in turn, the journalist opened up a whole opportunity.
You can just see this. Oh, that's why I went through that. That's when it got. Isn't that crazy? It's
so beautiful. So we're heading into a beautiful time, but when COVID was about to come, I knew that it was coming for all of us. I knew 10 years before it happened, and I have the actual playbook on what they used and how they were developing the technology. How would I know that? Because in 2011 of July, under the auspices of a sinus surgery, I hired someone in the Department of Defense. I felt really strange about going in for this surgery, but I said, don't be conspiracy. Just go in, get your dumb surgery done. Fix it. Get it done.
Just a simple outpatient surgery, right? It's supposed to be.
Yeah, just get in there, clean up the polyp, and get out of there. And so, fix up a little of the structural stuff too. So I'm in there and preparing for the surgery, and the anesthesiologist looks at me and he says, oh, we'll be able to get your guard inside of the operating room as long as they use the special soaps and all that. And I was like, how do you know that? I didn't talk to you about that. So I was like, whatever. Don't worry about it. So when I came out of surgery.
So you had brought somebody with you to
because I didn't feel something was off.
You needed to be out for the procedure.
Yeah, I had to be, under anesthesia.
Yeah, so you're like, I need somebody there I can trust.
Yes.
Okay.
Just to keep it double, because
right.
I felt really weird.
Of course.
And I tried not to, overestimate that and say, okay, well, it's no big deal. It's a surgery. You've already done it before. It's just the polyp came back, fix it, no worries. So when I went into the surgery and I came out, the anesthesiologist, he's standing in the hall. My friend was getting the wheelchair, and he's standing in the hall, the anesthesiologist, and he's shaking his head like this. And I'm like, I'm alive. I'm fine. I don't know what your problem is, but I'm fine. Thank you very much. And then other clues started to hit me that something's off. So I'm like, okay.
Was the anesthesiologist talking to somebody, or just
was
had
in the
this
hallway.
Concerning look?
He was concerning, looking at me. My friend is going to bring the car to the front of the building, and I'm sitting inside this wheelchair. And
you just got something's off.
Something's really off because he's looking directly at me, still in his scrubs, and he's like, and I'm like, I'm fine. I'm awake.
Yeah.
I don't know what your problem is.
Your job is to make sure I wake up, right?
Yeah, exactly. It worked. Good job, So I knew something was off because when I ended up back home, I had major hives, something like hives. Mm-hmm. And I complained and I said, you guys probably didn't change the sheets. I'm scratching like nobody's business.
An allergic reaction or something.
Some kind of in my throat, and it went on for several weeks, and I was taking pictures of everything. And so as I'm feeling like, okay, there's something still off, but I don't know what it is. No big deal. Let's just go get some special cream and deal with it.
Right.
Time goes on. Then I had a huge nosebleed, and it was concerning. And I went back to the same surgeon, and I said, listen, really bad nosebleed. And he's like, okay, it was my fault. He said he was just trying to be honest. And he's like, I counted 10. I might have left it in too long, and I apologize if you had a nosebleed. And I said, everyone, you did fine. It's fine. Just figure out what I need to do to put the stuff back in there and fix me up. And so I go back. Now, this is where everything got weird. I said, at the desk, to the lady behind the desk, I said, and by the way, I collect all my medical records. So can you just make me copies of the pathology report? She gives me a look. She's looking at me like, why is she asking for this? And I said, look, lady, it's going to go in a shoebox. I just keep everything in case someone asks me a question or billing or whatever. I've got a record of it somewhere, and I don't have to keep bothering you for it 10 years later. So she's fumbling under the desk, and she's like, she gives me some documents, and others she was siphoning off. I was like, no, those documents too. I need those documents too. I said, don't worry about it. Just copy it all. You don't have to sift through it all. You just copy it. I said, it's just going to go in a shoebox. So she's like, okay. She gives me the copies, and I go downstairs to the parking lot, and I look on the papers, pathology report, and it says the doctor's name, which one doctor was in all caps. Primary care was in all caps.
The doctor that you knew, that you consulted with.
The other one that actually recommended that I go see this doctor.
Okay.
And then this doctor was in upper-lower case. And then another doctor underneath it, upper-lower case, unknown doctor.
That you never met.
I don't know. Why are you saying unknown doctor? Why are you writing down on a pathology report unknown doctor underneath that?
No name.
No name.
Just third person unknown
says
doctor.
Unknown doctor.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, something's up. Something's up. But I don't know what it is. So it just so happens in 2006 or thereabouts, maybe 2004 or 5, somewhere around there. It's all accounted for in documents. I'll show you which documents just for the fun of it.
Sure.
This is an account of this entire story. This is 700, thank you, 700 and something pages in here, okay? And pathology report is right in here. And it basically says that
Is everything in there related to that story that
This
you just
story.
told?
Yep. And this is only one. There's been over 25,000 pages. July 4th, 2015, I sent this to Trump. I sent it also to several heads of state, and not all of these.
We're getting ahead of it here.
Okay.
So that surgery with these unknown doctors and the result of that became this. So what happened? What you got the pathology report. You said, "Who the heck is this third person?
Who is this?" And then I started getting symptoms, and I'm like, I'm too young to have a hot flash. And then I knew, because my uncle alleged to have been chipped against his will, I was like, okay, well, this is familiar. Thank you. This is familiar to me. I've seen and I've heard of these kinds of symptoms before relating to microwave sickness because of my uncle's own story. He's in the military and he spoke fluent Chinese, multiple dialects. So my uncle, asked for my help, and I investigated way back 2005 or 6, somewhere around there. And there's no help.
There's patents for microwave energy weapons, too.
Yes.
It's not a secret. It's
Nope,
not
it's
a
out
conspiracy. It's a real thing. You can look it up.
And I called and ran a 6-week investigation into my uncle's situation, went to the Congressman McGovern's office in Worcester, and I found out. I'm like, Uncle, pack your stuff, we're leaving. They just lied to us, and I'm not coming here to waste time. They just
Who lied to you?
The congressman's secretary. We were asking very clear questions
relating
to what type of security, who would be authorized to engage in certain kind of monitoring activities on someone like my uncle. And they even said to that, they said, oh no, we don't work with the Minutemen or something like that.
Hold on. How did you get from weird pathology report documents, something's wrong, I don't feel right?
Yep, back to my uncle.
To your uncle, to a congressman's secretary.
Okay. Here's how it all connects. I would never have known what to do about my symptoms unless I was introduced to what happened to my uncle. I got his scans from the Amen Clinic, and I called an offshoot of the Amen Clinic because they have multiple clinics. And I found out that they lied to me. The woman, Megan, she lied, but then she was fired because when I went back to call, she was fired. So
lied about what happened to your uncle?
To my uncle.
Okay.
So I collected all this information. I called the Juan Trigo at the...
you believed your uncle, though. Why?
I believed it, but I needed
proof.
Verify because there's a lot of weird stuff going on at the same time.
Okay.
And I spoke with Veteran Affairs in broken Spanish. I'm not the best studying Spanish. I tried to figure it out on my own, with my friend there in high school. And so I get tenses mixed up. But anyway, you do the best you can. So the guy out of Veteran Affairs in Puerto Rico said, your uncle's not crazy. This really is happening to him. And I said, finally.
It was still actively happening to him.
Yeah.
The damage,
the damage from being when he was implanted with subcutaneous devices that emit frequencies, they're chips.
So something foreign was implanted into your uncle. You believed his story.
I believed it.
And you said, we got to go find proof of this.
We have to figure it out.
You were, as being part of the military, it's no secret, the government absolutely 100% owns you, and they'll yell it right in your face, right? That's not a secret.
That's right.
So that's why they can test stuff on you.
Absolutely.
So you went to go get the paper trail. You were lied to.
Yep. And that's when I said, you know what, Uncle? There's no remedy for this. You're going to have to leave the country and just do the best you can. There's no justice for this.
But you're still suffering with these symptoms at the same. So you're both suffering at the same time with similar symptoms.
Now, his situation happened in 2006. That's how I gathered suitcases of data on him. I had suitcases of his data. So years later in 2011,
when you had your surgery,
when I went through my surgery and I had weird symptoms,
that connected the dots.
I connected to some of these experts, like James Walbert was one of them. And I said, Uncle, you have to be in circles of others that understand what you've been through, because you don't want to just talk to us. Your family's your family, but you need people that are experts to be able to understand what's happening to you and to find maybe little Faraday remedies for yourself, whatever you can do to get that comfort and community. That's what you need. So I put him in touch with James, and I learned from James about another individual, and I said, I'm doing the best I can. All I can do is pray for you. I took 6 weeks out of my life. I don't have more time for that, so I'm just going to wish you the best and pray for you, and that's it. So he went away. And then when all these symptoms were happening to me, I called James Walbert, and he directed me to purchase a
who you had talked to previously regarding your uncle's thing. Okay.
And that whole circle of people, the targeted individual class or people, right? So there's a bunch of people that are called targeted individuals, and they can use any kind of weaponry against you, whether it's distant or things from within your body that they put in there. There's so many ways to do it nowadays. But when this was happening to me, I was like, okay. I put in all the symptoms and put commas on a Google search engine, and it showed microwave sickness. I was like, microwave? I don't even have a white microwave. I don't even need popcorn from my microwave. Yeah. So how is this possible?
Right.
So I'm like, okay. Oh, I have my uncle's suitcase. So I went through my uncle's suitcase, and I found
of all his records.
All his records, and I'm like, you know what? I have the name of a private investigator who saw James Walbert. She happens to be in Missouri, and I have a court case in Missouri next couple weeks. So I called her up. I said, would you be okay to see me? I said, I bought like a JM20 Pro, but I don't even know how to turn the thing on. It's saying I have something, and James Walbert says...
Wait, what's a JM20 Pro?
That's a...
Beatbox you play the Gregorian chants on?
Nice! The JM20 Pro is an RF meter. It will read if you have signals coming to you or from you to the environment. So it's an RF radio frequency. It will let you know.
It shows you if there's a signal coming from something.
Yes. Yep.
Very simply.
Very simple. Okay. It'll just go in the red. You'll be like, okay, yep, there's
a signal.
Yeah, there's a signal somewhere.
Right.
But how do you determine the signal is using the other equipment, which a professional will have. Technical surveillance countermeasures people will have the proper equipment to tell you.
Okay, so you're digging through your uncle's stuff. You're
yes.
like, I'm exhibiting symptoms of what appears to be microwave sickness.
Yep.
And had you tied, you tied it to the surgery because that's kind of what started it. This unknown
from
doctor.
The itchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now you've got this meter and you're putting it on yourself.
I asked James, he says, what do I do? He says, buy your JM20 Pro. And I did. I bought it from eBay. And he says, okay, I'm on Skype now. And his Skype went out, so we had to text each other while he could still see me on Skype. I have pictures of all that in here. Everything is documented, literally.
Well,
right?
we're not done with that.
We don't have to go into all this, but the essence of it is, he's like, oh, no, dear, you've got something coming out of your ears, and you've got it from the stomach area. And I'm like, oh, come on, this is broken. I bought it on eBay, whatever. I says, would you be okay if I used your private investigator to do a real assessment on me?
How much time had gone by between the surgery and that conversation?
I'd have to go back to my notes.
Days, weeks, months?
I would expect at least a couple of months.
Okay.
Because the itching it was bad. It wouldn't go away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, they didn't. It's not the sheets.
Did it come and go?
Else. It came and it turned into other symptoms.
Right.
And so from the itching to hot flashes.
Okay.
So how could you have a hot flash? How do you? I was too young for that. It didn't make sense, and my body wasn't healthy.
You take very good care of yourself.
I do try. I do.
Yeah.
It's a temple, so we try to work on it.
So you asked for this private
meeting with with
His guy,
James's
yeah.
contact.
Okay.
And I went in and I met with her and her other, associate. They tested, took them a couple of hours, and they said, "Oh yeah, you've got signals coming out of your body." I said, "Put it on yourself. Put the Seiko, the devices, and the other one, the RF meters, on your body." She's like, "It's not coming from me." And she's, and then as it came closer to me, the numbers were going up. 2.86 gigahertz switch range.
And you're seeing this in real time.
I'm seeing this in real time. I'm like, well, I said, let me ask you one question. Have you ever had someone targeted come back to you and then you retested them and all of a sudden they have no more signals coming from their body to the environment? She said, not one. I said, I'm going to be your first because I never consented to this. In the name of Jesus.
What's this?
She said, you have something in your body that was placed in there that is like a cell phone. So you're walking around and it is...
So something was put into you that is emitting a frequency. That is making you ill.
Actually, more than one frequency. Yes.
More than one frequency.
Yeah.
And there's hard written proof and evidence that's in
all
there.
In here, under penalties of perjury. Yeah.
Okay, so you said... has anybody ever gotten rid of something like this? She goes, no. And you go, I'm going to be the first. Then what happened?
That's right. So then she says, I'm going to recommend you go to see another doctor in Los Angeles. And it just so happens that when I went in the plane, as I was on my way to see her to test me, there was a white van next to me and I could feel even more pain. So whatever
like
was
driving?
in the driving on
You're
my
driving.
way to...
There's a white unmarked van.
It said some kind of special plate.
Okay.
It was special. It wasn't a normal
Okay.
plate. So...
And when the van was closer to you, you felt worse.
I felt much worse. So I'm like, okay, whatever was in my body, I felt at that point was being activated.
Yeah.
All right. So at that point, that's when I got there. And she found the results, and I said, okay, so...
The secondary doctor that was recommended to go to.
Well, all right, so the private investigator said, you have something, give me a little bit, just a couple days to get this report done, but I'm going to send you to another doctor, but you need, so I called the doctor. And this whole story, by the way, is told on the International Tribunal for Natural Justice under penalties of perjury. It's a notice to the world. So you get documents put in the camera for all the goodies, all the good parts of information here. So the essence of it is when I was flying, huge pressure was in my ears. So whatever was activated, pink fluid was coming out of my ears. So I knew something was radically wrong. And it was so painful. I was in tears, but I couldn't even cry because the pain was so bad. It was intense. So as the plane was descending, and I was supposed to get from San Diego to somewhere in Texas for my final leg of the trip, I'm like, I'm not going on the final leg of the trip. I can't handle the pressure in my ears.
Yeah.
And the lady sees me, and she's like, do you need an ambulance? I'm like, no, I just need my bags. Just please give me my bags. And she gave me...
You flying alone?
Huh? Yeah, just me with, And so so I got my bags, and I opened my address book. I'm like, who do I know around here in California? I'm like, oh, my friend, Mark. And Mark is... I says, how far are you from me? He's like, a couple of hours. I said, I'm over here in San Diego. I need you to pick me up. And I got to a hotel close to him, and I sat in that hotel for like 2 to 3 weeks. So I could figure things out. I'm like, okay, so I need to figure out from here. The private investigator wrote me back. The email came through. She gave me my report with the frequencies and the signals and all that.
Okay,
so I have something. I'm waiting patiently as I can. She gives me that and says, okay, I need you to see this doctor in Los Angeles. I said, how coincidental and perfect is this? Mark lived in Los Angeles. I'm right here. So she says, I don't have any openings, the doctor, toxicologist, I don't have any openings until blah. I said, don't worry about it. I'm right here.
I got work to do.
I can do my work from my laptop right here or whatever. And it was weird. A lot of weird stuff was going on. On the Sister Carrie channel on YouTube, they did take down some videos. The other videos are still up. So you can still see some of it. There's a video called Jesus Defeats Nanotechnology Weapons. enjoy that. That's very powerful. I give you pictures in the hotel what I saw happening to my phone, like really weird stuff. Okay. So now I go in to see this toxicologist, and I bring in my report, and I said, these are the signals. And she has me go through a couple of hours of testing and all that. And she's like, yep, you got signals coming out of you. I said, so what is it? You know what? From the frequency, can you tell me if this is like a chip? Is it, what is this? And she says, oh, it's nanotechnology. I said, what the heck is that?
Like she talks about it every day.
I'm like, I've never heard of the word. What are you telling me? Nanotechnology?
Yeah.
And so.
This is like a PhD doctor?
Oh, yeah. Brilliant. Okay. She's too brilliant. I had to take all her information and break it down for an 8th grader.
Gotcha.
To make this able to be comprehended by regular people here.
So she says, you have nanotech.
You have nanotech. I said, well, who did it? She said, the Jesuits. I said, why? She says, because you love God. I said, there's so many other people that love God. I said, how is that? That's not even logical. She says, so I said,
this medical doctor said flat out nanotechnology.
PhD doctor, toxicologist.
Yes. Sorry, yes.
But there's a medical doctor that did support what her findings were.
Said nanotech, Jesuits, basically in the same sentence almost.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
I was like, okay. So I said, look, lady, I don't know what nano means. I'm not even going to bother trying because that's way over my head. I pull up my debit card. I said, can you fix it?
Yeah.
She's like, well, yeah, you can fix. I said, what is it going to take? She says, well, you have to do this. And it was 75 pills a day back then. There's easier things you could do nowadays to do it. But back then, in 2000.
I'm guessing these aren't pills you get at Walgreens.
No, these were, these are going to be special
vitamins,
protocols.
Minerals, stuff like that.
Specific to
very specific.
Breaking down nanotechnological biotech weapons stuff. So the lady's amazing. She's just unbelievably brilliant. She's too smart. Anyway, so I said, she's putting the bags together. I said, how much is that going to last me? She says, a month. I said, I am not coming back here in a month. I said, give me, how long do I need to be on this protocol? She says, maybe 6 months. I said, get me 6 months worth of pills, whatever, these vitamins or whatever they are, herbs. And because she was trying to save me money. And I said, don't, just take the thing off the card. She's walking me out to the car with full of suitcases full of these things. And that night, I asked her the question, so has anyone come to you with this kind of a problem and they're no longer chipped? She says it is possible, but the one who did come back made a deal with the government and she received $100 million, so she kept her mouth shut, but they did help her to get it out of their body. And I said, okay, well, let me know. If you know the lawyer on that, let me know, and I'd be happy to consider working with him. She's like, okay. So I'm out there in a restaurant popping 75 of these pills, trying to eat just a little because I can't fit it all in me. And I was doing that, and I'm following all the protocols, drinking all this crazy water with her weird mixes, and it was delightful because it worked, but extremely painful. I will admit this, because you got things that already cemented itself within your body, and you can't just carve it out. You can't take out nanotech. It has to melt. You have to get rid of it.
To dissolve it.
And there's different kinds of nanotech. So when, at this point, she calls me back, she calls me and says, oh, well, I have the phone number to the lawyer you might want to talk to. And I said, wonderful. I said, that would be great. I would love to be recompensed for all the stuff I've been through, and surely this is pretty expensive. It's $13,000 for one lab test. This is $600,000 of effort,
Jeez.
Okay? Dealing with not just her side of it, but dealing with technical surveillance, all the other stuff I had to do to deal with this, to remedy this problem. So.
Well, you went way beyond just healing yourself.
Yes. I went into forensic analysis, into proving who did this to me, down to the chemical components, to the military analysis on who's who and what's what, who's behind the technologies. Like, I went very deep into this. This was my way of God working through me to wage war against the fourth beast that did this to me. And so the bottom line is, she calls me with the lawyer's name. Oh, yeah, his name is Daniel Sheehan. And I'm not saying Daniel's evil or an evil guy. I'm just saying this. When I went to do research, Daniel P. Sheehan, I looked on his website, and it said that he was the general counsel to the Jesuits. I was like, wait a minute, doctor, I can't work with this guy. This is a conflict of interest. She's like, well, he was able to get the $100 million for her. I said, well, I would really like the $100 million, but I can't work with them, not in my conscience.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, all right. So I won't work with him, but, maybe I'll, so all that after the 6 months. And then after that, I went back to the private investigator, got tested again, healed. No more signals. No signals
Same
coming.
machines, same protocols.
Same protocols.
No signals.
No signals.
Documented.
The signals, it's documented in here, and it's on my YouTube channel, Sister Space Keri, Keri. And then the toxicologist tested me again, total turnaround in results, okay? And then you might ask the question, well, why would they chip you? Well, the bottom line is my body, because of nanotech the way it is you could just get smart dust, breathe it, and it replicates in your body from the inside out, into your organs, into all the systems. My eyes were cameras. They could see everything I could see, just like in the movies. Your ears, these ears, they were hearing everything I was saying, everything everyone else was saying in front of me. So it's like an espionage tool, device, people being chipped like this. It could control your central nervous system. So if you're not acting in accord, they can... I forgot how to drive once in the middle of the highway. And my windows went up and down in my car. It was controlling the things in my car at the time. But fear is not the answer to this. Love is the answer. And when I say that, that's not a cliche. Jesus Christ is love. And Jesus Christ wins against such things. This is the prelude to the mark of the beast, in my opinion. Totally. This is what they did. This was the testing on what was designed with COVID. When people took their shots, why they were emitting signals. This was all the testing done on a test subject that's unwilling and didn't even know, to perfect their technology so it could then turn into gene therapy and editing and all that other stuff. But there's a remedy to this. And the key to this is, were there moments I was afraid? Of course, it's only normal. But I would call my friends. Don't come in my house. Don't come near me. I'm going to be doing a lot of cleansing. I'm going to be in saunas for like hours on end, sweating. I'm going to be gross. Don't come over my house. Leave me be. And I told my friends, if I feel in any way, shape, or form that you're a threat to me, I will cut you off and you will never know me again. I will move and I will leave. You're either on my side or you're not. And one friend said, well, please just go and get tested for cancer. If you don't have cancer, then I'll believe you. I said, fine. That's a logical request. Let's go and get it done. I went and got tested. The doctor said, you're fine. No cancer. She looked at me and I was like, I told you. And I said, let me show you my urine test. Porphyrins are in the urine test. That's nanotechnology if you get porphyrins in your pee test, okay? So I showed it to her and I said, I'm just warning you. If I feel you're a threat to me while I'm trying to fix this problem, I will have to move. I will have to get away from you. I love you, but I can't put myself in jeopardy. And I am of sound mind. And the other thing is I also have several pages of a psychological evaluation. I got that done in advance. And psychological evaluation shows not nuts at all. Whatever was done to her was nuts. That's what's crazy. What was done to her? This was real. And that's also on the ITNJ testimony, Keri Bernor, ITNJ. So why I share all this is the weeping with Jesus being chained to the floor is this body, all of us, were being threatened with the ultimate crucifixion. And yes, there is a resurrection after the crucifixion, but all of us as a body, kingdom citizens, believers, we're on a timeline. If little me with Jesus Christ, who's everything and he's God, okay? If he can beat this, proven, this is all sent to the military, okay? 2015, July 4th, and it's 25,000 pages, maybe even more than that by now, because I continue to send reports. to Trump and those in the know that need to know about these technologies and other technologies they're going to try to pull on us. If we can win against this, we're in a different timeline. We're not headed for the mark of the beast and the false Christ, the Antichrist getting up on the temple and sitting there and handing us all, I always say, handing us all our asses. It's not going to happen like that. We're on a different timeline. And so that's going to tie also into a lot of the other historical elements that's coming out now with Tartaria, and the books that were removed from the Bible, because the same people that removed the books from the Bible are the same people that blew up some of those buildings and repurposed the buildings for government. So that will ease back into that. But in tying this thing together, after doing that testimony, Sasha and his people came and in a beautiful way extended their invitation so that I could offer my testimony on this. And because of the way the testimony was written and styled, it activated all the militaries of the world to take heed to the data that I gave on that
Who's
testimony.
Sasha?
Sasha Stone's the one who was a trustee, is no longer for the International Tribunal for Natural Justice.
Gotcha.
So,
and that's kind of that forum was why this needed to be so authenticated and formatted in this way, because it needed to get to that level.
Because we're in a system where there's no justice until the infrastructure is put in place for the original government, which is coming. It's coming back as we speak. It's literally being formed and built. The infrastructure for that other government is being built now, in complete contradiction to this corporate entity, this corporate beast that was ruling us. That corporate beast, Washington, D.C., was an extension of the fourth beast of Rome that crept in and took jurisdiction over all of us because we didn't know any better, just from the birth certificate alone.
Right.
Now they didn't want to just hybridize us to a piece of paper. They wanted to hybridize us with this vaccine, which is not a vaccine. I've already done extensive research into that. And so essentially, they wanted to use, under the auspices of a vaccine, they wanted to tie us together with this nanotech interface so that we would become not only their property, but literally all of the aspects of our bodies would be monitored. And if you're not acting in compliance, they can have you do anything at their will behind a computer screen. They can say, okay, we'll make their heart rate go up. They're out of line. Or we can make them pass out, or we can actually put a kill switch on them. Get rid of them.
And legally, they can, because your property, unless you correct the record, unless you correct the status.
And yet now those laws are being shifted and
there's
in favor
definitely a
for
change.
the original, and that's why the military has to be involved. It's because under Article 3, Section 3, it says, anyone who wages war against the posterity, those who are of, the constitutional United States of America, when you wage war against us, you've created a situation where you're now a nexus to treasonous acts. And now every penalty that's tied to treason is now designated to you. And what's even worse than that, again, is under the 13th Amendment, there's no slavery, and yet this is precisely what they wanted from us, is to be slaves and to, for other data input purposes and things like that. So we have come through the other side on this, and that indicates to me that there is a different timeline that we're on. If I didn't survive through this, I was offered by Department of Defense, people in the CIA. I was connected into people inside of FBI. FBI, if I was wrong on all this stuff, why did they come and interview me in 2012?
Specifically around this sickness, the nanotech.
I didn't know what they were after until later, but I was already going through weird things, but I didn't know what they really wanted. So it just so happened that I had a recorder in my pocket. And they were asking me questions that were way above their pay grade. Well, do you believe the Pope owns us all through the collateralization of our birth certificates?
Wait, what? The FBI showed up and said that?
Absolutely. I'll tell a funny story. So I'm doing a seminar in, I think it was Stabridge Suites in 2012 in Texas. And there's a teacher, Jack Smith, my dear friend, Jack Smith, who's now in heaven.
Rest in peace.
Rest in
We'll
peace.
see him again.
Precious soul. Yeah. What a lovely man. So I always wanted to buy him the Kincaid painting of the Wizard of Oz as a gift. And I was like, okay, good. So I hurried up, I purchased it, and he's going to be at the seminar for a few days, so good. All I need to do is overnight it. They says, okay, we'll get it on time, no problem. A day goes by, no painting. I'm like, oh, no. And then the second day comes, and there's only one more day left. And I'm like, we got to get the painting, or it's not going to come in on time, and I can't award him. I can't give it to him. So I got on them, and I said, I paid extra for shipping. So I thought FedEx was calling me back, and I had to run to the ladies' room, and I'm on the toilet there. And, of course, I'm on those kind of toilets that when you get up, it flushes.
Automatic, yeah.
Isn't that just real wonderful, right? So FedEx calls, and everywhere I go, I was having a recorder and a phone or something. And I'm thinking, oh, this is just FedEx. I'm happy. Jack's painting is going to come in. I can award him. Hi, is this FedEx? And they're like, no, this is the FBI. I said, oh, how can I help you? He says, is this Carrie Berner? I said, it depends. Is Carrie Berner under investigation? No, not at all. We want to talk to her about a friend, or not a friend, some other guy. They named a name. It was just, whatever. I says, how can I help you? And they said, well, we'd like to have a meeting. Can we meet at your home? I said, you know where I am. I'll see you at 2:00 in the Mercury room in the hotel. I mean, the place. And Stabridge. So they said, okay, we'll see you at 2:00. Then they call me. They say, a half an hour before they came, can you meet now? We're in the parking lot. I said, no, we have a 2:00 meeting. Is anyone else expected to be there? I said, you can ask them, well, what's their names? I said, you can ask them. I says, we will meet at 2:00. I will see you then. Click. Nice try. It was for 2:00, not any other time. And don't, I'm trying to stay on my zone here, I had to juggle between doing the seminar and all that. So they come. Jack even said, he's like, they were so nervous meeting you. And I'm like, I was the one nervous.
Right, yeah.
Because I don't know what they want. And I
Right.
started feeling weird stuff in my body, but I couldn't put two and two together if they were part of the chipping or what. I'm like, I'm not going to blame them. I don't know. I got to figure this out, right? So I said, well, I have cookies for you. And I have, I got water for you. And it's funny because that's what they do, for you, right?
Yeah.
And but they were lovely. They were friendly. They were very well mannered. They weren't threatening. They didn't stick a badge in my face or any of that. It was just very professional, and I appreciated that. So we had a good long talk for about an hour and something. And
About what? The Vatican?
they asked, yeah, in the course of the discussions, they were asking me about, they said, does the Vatican own us all through the collateralization of our birth certificates?
Were they writing anything down? Your
Some of them
answers?
were. Some of them were. And later the file was retrieved by another friend of mine in the DOD, and they assigned me an alphanumeric code. They were wanting to hire me as a confidential human source. But I didn't know what's going on because I'm like, is this about the chipping? Because I also had another guy there presenting at the seminar that
Did they bring up the chip or sickness or anything?
nothing.
No.
So I'm like, it has to be something separate from that. So I'm like, okay. And then they asked me about the 1933 Emergency Banking Relief Act. And I'm just like, well, yeah, under Title V. And I started to go into the administrative procedure stuff. And I started to talk about, I was like, no, people should be paying their bills. You don't, evade and then cause banks to run into a problem with their credit. Just because you think you want to do a sovereign citizen stuff. And he says, well, you're really not like them. Very similar, but you're not the same. And so we just had this very good dialogue. But later it hit me. And I gave that recording to Trump and the military. So
You recorded the phone call. Did they
the
also
meeting.
let you record the meeting?
They didn't let me do No,
But
it's a
you
one-party.
recorded
It was a
one-party
one-party
state.
state,
So
I had that
okay.
right in my pocket because
Got
I
it.
didn't know what I was dealing
Yeah.
with. I'm like, if something goes down, at least I'll have a recording of it.
Yeah.
I don't know, you know. So, but they were still though. I just appreciated how professional they were, friendly too, and we were laughing. I was joking around about like, don't.
What a surreal.
It was really weird.
Experience.
I'm like, don't hold me for anything on my Facebook. People put stuff up there all the time. I can't even get into the Facebook. And they're like, no, we're not even bothering on other websites. And I said, well, like I said, people put stuff up on the internet all the time. So if you have questions, ask me about the things I have control over, which is my website and all that. Just friendly. So what was going on to me was, okay, the FBI is aware that I'm aware that someone's committed treason. Because if the Pope does own us all through the collateralization of our birth certificates, someone had to treasonously wage war against the people. The Emergency Banking Relief Act forced upon us was under Franklin Roosevelt in 1933, but that was in order to make us collateral, make us surety. So someone committed treason, because to make the enemies from within the United States, to enemies without the United States, 1917 was the Trading with the Enemy Act. That's normal. You got to protect the United States against enemies, foreign and domestic, and that's normal. You're going to have a nice little way to define who's the enemies. If we're in World War I, then here's going to be our criterion for enemies that we need to be watching out for. Now, in 1933, the word enemies in the Act of October 6th, 1917, but now that act was changed from the Trading with the Enemy Act to the Emergency Banking Relief Act. They said an act of October 6th. They weren't being honest. They took it and reversed the wording and said that basically the enemies without the United States are now no longer the enemies without, they're within. Mm-hmm. So a foreign power did take over, and a coup d'etat did take place, and it happened in 1933. So that recording was sent with names, faces, and places, and data that I've collected throughout the years on who I believe the parties were involved at the treasonous level, which included George Soros. I had documents on him because of Christopher Strunk. Christopher, a dear friend of mine, he's passed on, had a lawsuit against Obama and all of that, and that was going back to the birth certificate stuff. But of course, if you don't have to be, back then, if you're under the corporation, then and you're not part of the Republic of the United States, then sure, you can have anyone be the president of that.
Right.
But we didn't know that stuff back then. So my friend Christopher Strunk shows that we were not only enemies within the United States, because this stuff I just kept telling him, I'm like, look, someone's got to do research on this and someone's got to do something about this. So he created a long record in the courts about all of this stuff that we've been studying together for years. And so with regards to the emergency in 1933, that's when we were able to put it together that there were parties like George Soros that were contributing to Obama and all of that, for the continued overthrow since 1933. And I said, Chris, did you read your transcript? He's like, what do you mean? I said, if you read that closely, the reason George Soros was excused from your court case, it doesn't have to come back, is because Mr. Aller, who's his attorney, stipulated that he was a private citizen. So I'm like, we need to reverse engineer this. So I'm like, here, take a couple $100 or $300. Study what this word private citizen means. He says, oh, it's in the Law of Nations. I go in the bad book, and I'm like, it's not in there. I said, so then there was another class I held in 2010, think in Ohio, and I said, listen, I've got too many clients that are in deep poo-poo right now, and they need help. I don't have time to go back and reverse engineer this. So there's a
reverse engineer what?
How the private citizen, how did...
What is it? Why is it special, and how do we get it?
Yes. Okay. How is there a difference between others and ourselves, and how come they have rights but we don't have rights?
Okay.
So there was a historian in my class, And he took that and went all the way with it and studied it to nobody's business. And I was super pleased with that because that person was able to get to the root and the history of it. Again, we're doing the best we can to put the puzzle pieces together. And so the essence of it is then I started to collect more and more data, and that's how I knew. I'm like, that meeting with the FBI, that's the evidence. That is, they were concerned that I would put two and two together on who committed treason against the United States. And it was, in fact, Rome, through their agents. That's why the Logan Act, it exists. So
wait, so the the realizations and the research with the private citizen thing that resulted from that Soros case and all that plays into correcting the status?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because that's when I said, okay, someone's got to reverse engineer this. So my friend did it in history. He reverse engineered the history. And then I started to create a process, even back then, to getting us to be able to lay claim, because I presented Hale versus Henkel in the class to the historian, to all of them. And I had friends from when I was in the convent in Still River. I knew of two ladies, and they drove all the way to Ohio. And her dad was CIA, and she said in the class, my dad says if the police stop you, just tell them you're a private citizen and that you'll be on your merry way. Don't worry about it. And I was like, so now we have my friend in the class who's saying this, in addition to the transcripts of George Soros, the case, how he was no longer participating in this case. So we reverse engineered it, and that's how I was able to finally put it together on what we could do. And that's when I realized that that's why those cases went away. And with those, a couple of those people that I just mentioned earlier, it's because we went back to that original status. So there's multiple ways of doing things, and the way we offer it here at the Diplomatic Mission for the Cygnus is we provide a record that is sworn to under penalties of perjury, that this is who we are. This is the side of the ledger we're on. Yes, we have an account, that name, but we're not.
You're saying for somebody that wants to change and correct their status, you
Yes.
have the instruments, the paperwork, the process, tried and true. I've done it.
Absolutely.
It works.
And you came in, I didn't even know. I had no idea what kind of things you were going through, and yet you dutifully stood up and you're like, you know what? Let me iron this out, let me iron that out, and you move forward. And you got the evidence, you received the correspondence from the Department of State and other things,
And a few
wonderful
other things,
things.
yeah. So that in our studies, I feel like every time we see that word citizen, it's like, it's a dirty word. Oh, I'm a citizen. I don't like that word. It's in some law dictionaries, I think Black's First, Fourth, or whatever, says you're a shareholder.
Yeah.
Like it can mean several things, but why is this, I guess, usage different?
Okay, now, others used to, shriek at the word human, right?
Mm-hmm.
Black's Law Dictionary was written by Jesuits. So they're going to take things away from you. They're going to contort and change the meanings of words. And I'm going to use them. And I'm going to define the words when I'm using them. So if I use the word human, it means hummus of the earth, hummus, humility, hummus, what you eat, beans and all that.
It totally goes back to the whole assuming thing. We assume we're free. You live in America, you're free.
Yeah.
No, you're assumed wrong. You assume this word means what you think and what they're using it in the case, the situations that they're using. That's not what the word means to them. So yes, you have to. Sorry.
The Jesuits, they twisted the meanings of the words, in particular when I'm talking about Black's Law. Okay,
Yeah.
And it's not just Jesuits. We've got other things too happening. Yeah. The fake Jews, I call them, just to keep it simple because, man. But anyway, so human is a hummus man. So man is soul, ish in Hebrew, and hummus is of the earth. So we have dominion over the earth because we're made of clay. on the earth. This is the first real estate. This is the first temple. So when we take jurisdiction, heavenly jurisdiction over this, now we have the dominion on the other part of the earth. And that goes even deeper. So when I was yelled at, don't use the word human, I'm like,
who yelled at you for
why?
using it?
I won't say who specifically, but let's say someone.
Was it a court situation?
No, not at all. It was someone who's a rabid studier of words.
Gotcha.
Right,
Okay.
words. I'm like, no. What's the basis for which you're having a problem with the word? Black's Dictionary. I said, good. I hope you have a problem with Black's Dictionary then, because that's made by the Jesuits. So I said, I'm going to use the word human. And the reason why the Jesuits, because they're taking command from the fallen ones, they want us to stay away from that word because that's where we get our ability to have the jurisdiction over the earth, our dominion on the earth. So they're trying to have us depart from the original command in Genesis that we were given. So there's always, the ones who wrote the codes at the IRS, they're not just humans, not just people. There's fallen beings involved in the writing of these laws.
It's so convoluted and so I believe purposely so.
Absolutely. So that's why I'm like, okay, if you have a problem with the use of a word, we need to get to that. We have to find out, well, why are you having a problem with the use of that word? So citizen.
Same thing with the status, going back to the basics.
Yes.
Are we talking about the same thing here?
Exactly.
Let's start at the beginning.
So citizen is a son of the city.
Okay.
But that wouldn't be a bad thing if you're a son of the city of Zion, the spiritual Zion. It wouldn't be a bad thing, but if you're a son of the city of the state of Massachusetts or state of whatever, then yeah, we have to have a problem with that. But what does it say in the scriptures? We're citizens of the kingdom of heaven. So I don't have a problem using the word citizen for that, but
Right.
I don't want you to bind me to this other corporate thing. So we have to, question things in multiple layers and kind of twist it around like a diamond and look at it from different viewpoints because they're constantly trying to trick us and trap us.
Yes, it's a constantly evolving thing. What would you say to somebody who, and I've been there, screw them. Why do I have to play in their sandbox? I know who I am. All that stuff. What do you say to that person?
Well, the sandbox is playing on you. So if the sandbox is playing on you and a cop stops you, you're going to have something to tell them. And if you say, I'm not going to play in your sandbox, well, they're going to put the cuffs on you anyway then. So isn't there a better way to deal with this as diplomats? So
You've used that word a couple of times. What does that word mean?
So they represent a kingdom or a nation or whatever they're going to, they're not there to propagate their own personal beliefs. They're there to only stipulate the wishes of the king. So if I'm a citizen of the kingdom of Most High, of heaven, then my job is not to make law myself, but to take what he says and what he feels, what God feels about things, and to effectuate that in society. So if the USA Incorporated wants to be friendly with me and friends with my Bible, like they did in the proclamation, then there's a diplomatic relationship. We'll be open to having that. However, if there's a lack of understanding and no desire to have that open dialogue, then they're the enemy. But so far, it's open. And why did Reagan do that? Why did he open and put in the Federal Register Proclamation 5013? In my opinion, Reagan knows about the Majestic 12 and the other documents that were used as means of secretly forming treaties with presidents of nations. This is where you get your stuff from Antarctica and all that good stuff. Behind our backs, behind secret closed doors, these presidents acting on behalf of the people, that's what they're called, representatives. So you gave them power of attorney to act on your behalf. Not me. There's a way outside of that. You can act as an emissary or a diplomat with relationship to the president, but not be under them unless you're in concord with them. So if they're operating behind the scenes, behind Franklin Roosevelt, he was the first one known to have a treaty of an exchange between fallen, angelic beings. Others call them aliens. Aliens it still works because they're aliens to the kingdom of heaven because they forfeited their citizenship in heaven. So they are aliens
By
in
definition,
that sense,
yeah.
right? So if these fallen beings are looking to have their own treaty with the United States and the presidents are saying, okay, Franklin Roosevelt and the other ones since then, except for Trump, okay, there's no treaty with Trump. That's why we get the alliance. There's no treaty with the underworld fallen beings with Trump.
Are you literally saying that we can, as children of God, whatever you want to call that relationship, we can literally take that personal, private relationship that tends to, in society, only exist inside of a church. Okay, you can only be that thing on Sunday, only be that at Sunday school. You're literally taking that relationship, blending it with the legal system of earth, for lack of a better term, and using that together in real time on this timeline to correct your status.
Absolutely. And it's been done. And then some. And I have things here to share with you on that. The original church, the word ecclesia, Greek, it's called out ones. Called out from what? From the beast systems of the world that's described in Daniel. But it doesn't mean that we're going to not participate in society. No, we're going to participate, but we're going to have an awareness on who our allegiance is to first. So if the church originally was a government, but now, because church and state became too cozy with each other, the original intent was the reason why the early Christians were killed in the first place is because they were treasonous against the state. No, they were assets. If the state would have seen their gold and the gift of who they were, they could have boosted civilization. But instead, they were suppressed until Constantine the Great, who's not a villain, okay? A lot of people say, oh, he's so evil. I did a whole 3-hour thing on just Constantine alone. He was allowing for the coexisting of Christians and pagans to live side by side. It was Theodosius later who tried to foist Christianity on everyone. I believe it was Theodosius. But then Theodosius had to pay the piper on that and say, okay, I repent. No, I'm not going to force religion or any of this on anyone. Jesus Christ himself made it very clear that this was about a kingdom, not a religion. Now, what is a religion? It's a trust. It's religio. Again. Ligio means to link back. So what's a linking back of what? It's successor trustees. To who? The apostolic succession. So the Orthodox faith deposit are nothing more, those Orthodox people with their long beards, all they are trustees. They're not wizards in different magical, clothing here. They're trustees to a trust. What is the trust? To preserving and holding fast to the things of God so that souls can touch that and have this world open to them about this kingdom. Jesus Christ made it clear that baptism was not a matter of religion, but a matter of state. Unless you be born again of water and the Holy Spirit. It's so powerful. I love it. When I realized this is when I realized that, no, the church didn't turn its back on me. It was the fallen side of the governance of a fourth beast system that married into the church, and the church then identified with the fourth beast. That's why you have people operating with 501c3s instead of a 508, which we'll get into. But in essence, Jesus Christ made it clear this was a matter of state. You getting baptized, unless you be born again of water and the Spirit, Holy Spirit, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. He is talking about baptism, meaning the dying in the water and then the rising to new life. That was a passport to heaven. That's not a ritual.
It was never supposed to be.
It was never supposed to be relegated only to a ritual. The ritual is supposed to be more like a sacrament, is an outward reality or an outward sign of an inner reality. So a passport, it could be a sacrament. You hold it up, it's an outward sign of an inward agreement, inward reality. So when it comes to, and I'm going to pull this because we don't need to get into this because this whole thing was done on the ITNJ, but we should.
If somebody wants to get into that, it's available.
Absolutely. ITNJ, Kiri Bernor testimony. So, so with regards to this beautiful awareness that, no, the Lord Jesus came here to declare a kingdom. And if his kingdom, if he was supposed to topple the Roman government at that time, that would have messed up the timeline that Daniel predicted with the big statue there. Jesus wasn't here to destroy Scripture. He was here to fulfill it. And so that's why Satan presented and said, listen, if you fall down and worship me, we'll screw up the timeline for you. We'll give you access to all the kingdoms now. And Jesus is like, take a hike. Nice try. I'm sticking to the timeline. Psalm 22, dying on the cross for us, being the suffering servant first, suffering Messiah. So it is not a religion. I mean, of course, we express things through trusts. The successor trustees have only one duty, and that is to maintain the kingdom. Maintain the kingdom, the precepts.
Define that word. You keep saying the word kingdom, and I know that's a very important word.
It's very important. So kingdom is a domain or a jurisdiction that comprises of beliefs, ideas, but also location. And in this case, it's referencing a location that's beyond what we can see with our eyes, because there was a point in time when Adam and Eve could see, just like cats and dogs, they can see beyond all different spectrum. But due to the fall and partaking of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there were angels standing by Adam and Eve before the fall. But when they fell, they left the jurisdiction of that safety. Once they left the jurisdiction of that safety, what were they introduced to? The tree of the knowledge of the good and evil was the presentation to a world where the cosmic war now involves them. So prior to humans being created, angels were already here. The angels, the ones that fell, created problems for the angels that didn't fall. So they've been at war ever since. And it's not just a little wispy cloud fighting with another cloud. This is all out duking it out for millennia. And then humans come in. They were protected in that bubble, didn't know good or evil. What is that? Well, as soon as that angel was removed from them, and now they're presented to this cosmic war, now they became the prize in the middle of a cosmic war. So that's pretty intense stuff.
Yes.
There is no such thing as an ordinary girl, like I always say that, or an ordinary man. Jupiter Ascending in that movie, which was directed by Stephen Mnuchin, later becomes Treasury, Secretary of the Treasury under Trump. That guy knew exactly what he was doing in the direction of that movie, directing Jupiter Ascending. So Jupiter, she believed herself to just be an ordinary girl. No such thing. We are the prize in the middle of this cosmic war, but the Lord Jesus, we're the ace card up the sleeve. Mm-hmm. How? Because the Godhead needed, he worked it out so that salvation would play itself out through the weakest ones of all. That's why the movie, the Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, the little hobbits are the ones that are going to finalize the throwing of the ring into Mordor, which is a jurisdictional aspect, right, which is the role of Christ, which is, your little hobbit story there with Frodo Baggins. But so when one works with us, they go ahead. So the bottom line is for those who want to work with us, we will help them to establish that government relationship, which is recognized with the U.S. government.
And this is not a one-size-fits-all. Here's the form.
No.
Here's, pay your money. here's the form. No,
No, this is custom.
It has to be.
Has to be.
Because no two situations are alike. It's consultative. You are there through the whole process, like literally on the phone with them.
Yeah, coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not like, oh no, just watch some videos and go away. No. We got to make sure this becomes meat on your bones, that it becomes a thing.
It's an outward representation of an internal change in belief system.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's not just checking a box. There are boxes to check, but
Absolutely.
it's not just checking the box.
Exactly. Because if we don't line up with the words we're saying on this page, on this documentation,
exactly,
it will be challenged. And you can't lie on a federal form either. So on my channel, Ambassador Nectaria on YouTube and on Rumble, because YouTube already had a few wrinkles with some of the things I was saying.
What's the website again?
It's ambassadornectaria.org. So that's just a little simple way to get in touch with us. What the type form allows, when you click on book a consultation, it basically allows us to know, number one, do you have any outstanding controversy with the IRS? If you do, resolve that first. If you had, some kind of thing going on in terms of a crime or something that, something's on your record, that has to be resolved first before.
There's some prerequisites.
Yeah, there's going to be
it's pretty straightforward otherwise, but it is not cookie cutter at all.
Not at all. Not at all. So,
we could we could be in here for a week.
I know it.
We just barely scratched the surface.
But yet we've covered so much. So all this to say is the good news is we are heading into a time where the plans of the enemy are being thwarted and the kingdom age is upon us. And what does that mean? It means we no longer have to be slaves. The biggest gift God ever gave us was our free will. How do we express our free will and participate and get outside of these fallen treaties between presidents and us? And how do we align with the true angelic alliance that's on our side? With using our free will. And when we activate and use our free will and start getting in on the right side of all of this and no longer being identified as surety, we're standing with the kingdom citizens on this. And that does open, because God has limited himself to our response, free will. Mm-hmm. Everything's free will in this realm. So another thing that's very important is there is a gentleman named Benjamin Thomas, and he has put out a trilogy. If you want to know the timeline you're on, it's not where, they're going to hand us our backsides. Not at all. It's the other way around. That's why they're so afraid. But they're going to try everything. So our job is to prepare to get out of their systems in a diplomatic way. So you're not judging them. All you're doing is listen,
correcting the record.
No, don't want to participate. Not in
Thank
that
you
way.
Very much. Sorry. Never meant to be in there in the first place.
Nope, made a mistake. We're fixing our mistake. And
not adversarial at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all. And they respect it. And so many of the clients that have come our way, they tell me, I feel so free. I feel a huge weight off my shoulders. I have not ever felt like this in my whole entire life, and other blessings that they've experienced as a result of making this stand. But
so anybody who wants to dig deeper into this, even if it's just, let's see what we can do here, reach out to you. Probably through the website's the best.
The website. And if you run into problems, because we've found this, just go to Ambassador Nectaria at proton.me, because we've been having some interesting anomalies. Yeah. And if they have to, they can reach out to you if you want to share that.
You have a team available to you as well. So you got backup.
And these are the books. If you want to know the timeline we're on, this is the eschaton, the eschatology that makes most sense to me as someone who firsthand knows what timeline we're on. So I highly recommend going to revelationriddle.com and reading every one of these books in fine detail, especially this last one here. This one will really freak you out. But the bottom line, the same ones who ripped out the scriptures and took those away from us are the ones who blew up those buildings, the Tartarian things, and we're getting into that, and we're unveiling all of that. Those buildings were not built by humans. They were built by the angelic civilizations before us. Those buildings are not, there's a real thing behind it. Why do those Tartarian buildings even mean anything? It's because when they blew up those buildings,
They're antennas.
they're antennas, but they also were trying to take us off a timeline and give Satan another 1,000 years to reign. Too late, we figured it out. So if you want, when you come to the YouTube channel there, the Rumble channel, Ambassador Nectaria, and look into that, we're going to constantly be updating that. Even more things are going to be published, which, it's all going to become available, but we'll find out what needs you have and address your specific needs. We offer the passport. We work together on that. You could work with me or Jason, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. Sometimes I talk too much. Can't help it. I just can't help it. I love this stuff. So we also offer the 508c1a ministries, which is a whole other thing. So just look that up.
Yeah, there's levels to this.
There's levels. Yeah. This isn't just a
Start
one.
with the status.
Yeah, start with the status.
Go from there.
And then your ministries will be something else that you'll want to prepare for, because we are heading this year, 2025, into the greatest wealth transfer of all human history. If the Hebrews were imprisoned for 400 years and God gave them all the treasuries of Egypt, we've been imprisoned for over several thousand years, okay? Mm-hmm. So what's the recompense going to be? It's huge. It's bigger than anyone can comprehend. But this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning.
Nectaria, it's been amazing.
God bless you. Thank you. And I cannot believe this. This is already 3 hours?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Over 3 hours.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, it's been an honor and a blessing. And
the honor's all mine. Thank you.